What's going on, everyone? It's Potter Paradox here. We've got something amazing for you today. What if Harry was adopted by the Volturi at age 5 after they sensed Dumbledore's manipulation? Twilight crossover real quick. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join thousands of story lovers and hit that subscribe button. Alright, story time. Chapter 1, Blood and Magic. The night air in Surrey hung heavy with summer heat as two figures moved silently through the darkness, their pale skin almost luminescent in the moonlight. They weren't supposed to be in England at all. The Volturi rarely ventured this far from Volterra without serious cause. But Arrow had been adamant after their sensors detected a magical anomaly unlike anything they'd recorded in centuries. "I still don't understand why we couldn't send the local contacts," Jane muttered, her childlike features contrasting sharply with the ancient coldness in her eyes. "Britain has always been Eleazar's territory." Demetri's lips curved into a slight smile. "Because, dear Jane, Arrow specifically requested you. Whatever's happening here isn't just magic, it's powerful enough to register on our instruments in Italy." They paused at the edge of an unremarkable suburban neighborhood. Privet Drive, identical houses lined up like dominoes, each with the same manicured lawn and boxy design. "Disgusting," Jane wrinkled her nose. "Humans and their obsession with conformity." Dimitri closed his eyes, focusing on the trace signature they'd been following. "It's here. Number 4. The house looked no different from its neighbors, but both vampires could sense it now, layers of magical energy wrapped around the property like invisible spiderwebs, pulsing with intent. "These aren't just protection wards," Dimitri murmured, his centuries of experience with magical communities making him the Volturi's best tracker for such assignments. "They're monitoring spells, binding magic, and..." He paused. "Something else. Something old." Jane's eyes narrowed. "Blood magic?" "Yes. And it's centered on someone inside." They moved toward the house, easily bypassing the garden fence. Unlike many magical protections, these weren't designed to keep vampires out, a critical oversight that made Jane smirk. Wizards always underestimated vampire abilities when it came to magical barriers. The vampires slipped through an unlocked window on the second floor, landing in what appeared to be a child's bedroom. A large boy slept sprawled across his bed, surrounded by broken toys and electronic devices. "Not this one," Dimitri whispered. "The magic isn't centered here." They checked another bedroom where a large man and thin woman slept, then moved to the hallway. Jane stopped abruptly outside a small door beneath the stairs. "Here," she hissed. The cupboard door was secured with a simple sliding bolt. Jane slid it open without making a sound and peered inside. A small boy, no more than 5 years old, lay curled on a thin mattress. Dark hair fell across his forehead, partially obscuring a lightning-shaped scar. Even in sleep, his face looked pinched and thin. The space around him was cramped, barely large enough for the mattress and a small shelf holding a few broken toy soldiers. But what made both vampires freeze was the magic. It swirled around the child like a living thing, some of it emanating from the boy himself, but other strands were foreign, invasive. Golden threads wrapped around his core, attempting to direct and contain his natural abilities. Dark red lines of blood magic anchored to his forehead, specifically to the scar. And woven throughout were monitoring charms, tracking spells, and compulsion weaves. "Someone has been very busy with this child," Jane said, her voice ice-cold. "This isn't protection. It's control." Dimitri knelt beside the sleeping boy. "I recognize some of these signatures. Albus Dumbledore. The wizard leader. The one who claims to be so noble." Jane's lip curled in disgust. "The very same." Dimitri reached out, his cold fingers hovering just above the boy's scar. "This child is important. These aren't random spells. They're calculated, designed to shape him for some purpose." The boy stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering. For a brief moment, vibrant green eyes stared directly at Jane before closing again. Take him, Jane decided. Arrow will want to see this for himself. You know the law, we can't just take a wizard child, Dimitri cautioned. Jane gestured around the cupboard. Look at this. Smell the air, there's old blood, fear. This child is being abused while wearing Dumbledore's magical chains. The laws permit intervention in cases of magical manipulation. And I want to know why one of the most powerful wizards in Britain has such interest in a child kept in a cupboard. Dimitri carefully lifted the sleeping boy, who weighed almost nothing in his arms. Harry Potter, he read from a crude drawing pinned to the wall, signed in childish handwriting. Potter. Jane's eyes widened slightly. The child who survived the killing curse. The one they call their savior. And they keep him in a cupboard, Dimitri said grimly. Arrow will definitely want to meet this one. They disappeared into the night, leaving nothing but a slightly disturbed bed to show the boy had ever been there at all. Arrow Volturi stood motionless as a statue in the grand chamber of Volterra's castle, his milky red eyes fixed on the sleeping child laid carefully on a velvet chaise lounge. Around him, his brothers Marcus and Caius maintained a respectful distance, equally intrigued by this unexpected development. You took a wizard child, Caius stated flatly, his tone making it unclear whether he was impressed or appalled. A heavily enchanted wizard child, Jane corrected, with Albus Dumbledore's magical signature all over him. Arrow's papery hands hovered over the boy, sensing the magic without touching him. Fascinating. Simply fascinating. The boy, Harry Potter, stirred, his eyes opening slowly. Rather than screaming or crying as most children might upon waking in a strange place surrounded by red-eyed strangers, he simply stared, a wariness beyond his years evident in his gaze. Hello, young one, Arrow said, his voice gentler than his guards had heard in centuries. Harry sat up cautiously, his oversized pajamas hanging off his thin frame. Am I in trouble? His voice was small but clear. No, child. Quite the contrary. Arrow smiled, showing just enough teeth to be unsettling. We found you in rather unfortunate circumstances and brought you somewhere safe. The boy looked around the ornate chamber, taking in the thrones, the vampires, the ancient stonework with remarkable composure. You're not human, Harry said suddenly, surprising everyone in the room. Arrow's eyebrows rose. What makes you say that? You don't breathe like people do. And your eyes are wrong. Harry touched his own chest, mimicking breathing, then pointed to his eyes. A delighted laugh escaped Arrow. Perceptive child. You are quite right. We are vampires, the Volturi. I am Arrow, and these are my brothers, Marcus and Caius. We rule the vampire world. Harry's eyes widened, but still, he didn't scream. Like Count Dracula? This time Marcus chuckled, the sound rusty from disuse. A poor imitation, I assure you. Are you going to drink my blood? Harry asked with surprising pragmatism. Not at all, Arrow replied. We are interested in you for entirely different reasons, Harry Potter. The boy flinched at his name. How do you know me? We know many things. Arrow extended his hand. May I? Harry hesitated, then placed his small hand in Arrow's papery one. The ancient vampire went still, his eyes unseeing as 5 years of memories flooded his mind, the death of Lily and James Potter, the flash of green light, Hagrid delivering the baby to Dumbledore, the old wizard casting spells upon spells on the infant, the years of neglect and occasional cruelty at the Dursleys, the budding awareness of being different, the strange occurrences when Harry was scared or angry. Arrow saw it all, including the fragment of another's soul embedded in the scar, and Dumbledore's manipulations designed to create a martyr, not a survivor. When he finally released Harry's hand, Arrow's expression had hardened from curiosity to cold fury. Albus Dumbledore, he spat the name, fancies himself a chess master, moving pieces for his greater good. And you, child, are meant to be his sacrificial pawn. Harry didn't fully understand, but he recognized the anger wasn't directed at him. Sir. What happens to me now? Will I go back to the Dursleys? No, all three Volturi kings said simultaneously. Arrow knelt to Harry's level, an unprecedented action that made several guard members exchange glances. Harry Potter, you have been manipulated and mistreated by those who should have protected you. What Dumbledore has done, placing you with those people, binding your magic, planning your entire life without consent, goes against magical law. I have magic. Harry whispered. More than most, Caius said dryly. That's what drew our attention across all of Europe. Marcus stepped forward. The bonds that should exist for a child your age, family, protection, nurturing, they're all but absent. In their place are artificial constraints and manipulations. It's offensive. Arrow reached a decision. We offer you sanctuary, Harry Potter. Stay with us, learn from us. We can remove the bindings on your magic, teach you to harness your power, and prepare you for the future Dumbledore planned without your knowledge. Won't people look for me? Harry asked. Let them, Caius smiled coldly. Harry looked around the chamber, at the red-eyed immortals who had taken him from his cupboard, and made the first truly independent choice of his young life. I want to stay. The first month in Volterra was strange and wonderful for Harry. He had his own room, not just a cupboard, but an actual suite with a four-poster bed, bookshelves, and windows overlooking the Tuscan countryside. The Volturi assigned Heidi, one of their more personable members, to oversee his human needs, ensuring he ate properly and had appropriate clothing. The physical transformation was remarkable. With proper nutrition and care, Harry's thin frame began filling out. His perpetually haunted expression gradually relaxed as he realized no one would lock him away or deny him food. But perhaps most significant was the magical unbinding. 3 weeks after his arrival, when Harry had settled enough to understand what would happen, Arrow arranged for a visiting witch, one of the few humans aware of the Volturi's existence, to examine the magical constraints placed on him. The witch, an ancient Romanian woman named Ileana with silver hair and knowing eyes, clicked her tongue disapprovingly as her wand moved in complex patterns around Harry's seated form. Dumbledore was thorough, she muttered. Binding spells on his magical core, restrictive charms on his cognitive development, even compulsion weaves to ensure certain emotional responses. She looked at Arrow. This is criminal, even by wizard standards. Can they be removed? Arrow asked, his usual flamboyance subdued. Yes, but it will be painful. She addressed Harry directly. Child, the magic bound inside you has been straining against these restrictions for years. When released, it will rush through you like a flood. It will hurt, but afterward, you will be free. Harry, sitting cross-legged on a marble table, nodded solemnly. I want them gone. Jane, who had taken a surprising interest in the human boy, stepped closer. I'll stay with him. The unbinding took hours. Harry writhed and screamed as golden threads were methodically unraveled from his core. Windows shattered throughout the castle as his unbound magic lashed outward. The stone floor beneath him cracked. At one point, his scar split open, leaking black ichor that hissed and evaporated as it hit the air. Through it all, Jane held his hand, whispering that the pain would end, that he was stronger than this. Coming from the vampire whose gift was to cause excruciating pain, the words carried weight. When it was finally over, Harry lay exhausted but changed. The air around him shimmered with raw power. His green eyes seemed to glow from within. The lightning scar, while still visible, was no longer red and inflamed. The fragment is gone, Ileana said, astonishment in her voice. I didn't think that was possible. Fragment? Arrow inquired sharply. Soul magic. The darkest kind. A piece of someone else was attached to him, it's what created the scar. The unbinding forced it out. Arrow's eyes gleamed with interest. Whose soul? Ileana shrugged. I can't tell you that. But whoever it was, they're not wholly dead if pieces of them can survive like this. Harry, barely conscious, heard only pieces of this conversation. But he felt different, lighter, cleaner, as though something that had always pressed against him was suddenly gone. "Rest now, young one," Arrow said, patting his hand. "Your new life begins tomorrow." Life among vampires proved surprisingly educational. The Volturi, after centuries of existence, had accumulated knowledge from across the world and throughout history. And Harry, free from Dumbledore's constraints, proved to be an exceptionally quick learner. By his 6th birthday, celebrated for the first time in his life with an actual party, Harry had established a routine that would have astonished the wizarding world. Mornings were devoted to conventional education, languages, mathematics, sciences, and history, taught by human tutors carefully selected, and sworn to secrecy, by the Volturi. Afternoons focused on physical training. Felix, the largest of the Volturi guard, took particular pleasure in teaching Harry basic combat moves. "You'll always be physically weaker than vampires," Felix explained, demonstrating a defensive stance in the castle's underground training arena, and probably outmatched by adult wizards until you're older. "So you need to be smarter, faster, and more strategic." Harry, dressed in workout clothes sized for his small frame, mimicked the stance perfectly. "Like David and Goliath?" Felix grinned. "I was there for that, you know. The story got some details wrong." Harry could never tell when Felix was joking about his age. The massive vampire delighted in claiming to have witnessed everything from the construction of the pyramids to the first moon landing. "The principle is sound though," Felix continued. "When outmatched in strength, use positioning and leverage." Like this, he demonstrated how Harry could use an attacker's momentum against them, sending them flying past with minimal effort. Harry practiced the move repeatedly until sweat dripped from his face. "Good," Felix approved. "Remember, humans are fragile, wizards are arrogant, and vampires are overconfident. Use that." Evenings were devoted to magical theory and practice. Without a wand, which he wouldn't receive until much later, Harry focused on wandless abilities, feeling his magic, directing it with intent rather than incantations. Ileana visited monthly to check his progress and provide wizarding perspective, but much of Harry's magical development was surprisingly guided by Arrow himself. "Magic and vampire abilities aren't so different," Arrow explained one evening in his private study, surrounded by ancient tomes and artifacts. "Both require focus, intent, and an understanding of the forces you're manipulating." Harry sat cross-legged on a Persian rug, trying to levitate a feather using only his mind and magic. The feather trembled but remained stubbornly earthbound. "I can't do it," he sighed after another failed attempt. "You're thinking like a wizard," Arrow commented. "They become dependent on wands and words. But magic existed long before wands. Try feeling the connection between yourself and the feather." Harry closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses as Arrow had taught him. This time, he felt it, a gossamer thread of energy connecting him to everything in the room. He focused on the thread leading to the feather, imagining it becoming stronger, more substantial. When he opened his eyes, the feather was floating steadily at eye level. "Well done." Arrow clapped his papery hands. "You see. Intent over mechanics." The lessons weren't limited to academics and magic. Politics, strategy, and the complex social dynamics of both vampire and wizarding societies featured heavily in Harry's education. "The wizarding world thinks you're their savior," Caius explained during one of their chess matches. Harry was only 7, but already playing at a level that would challenge adult humans. "Dumbledore has been shaping that narrative since the night your parents died." Harry moved his knight, capturing Caius's bishop. "Because I survived when Voldemort tried to kill me?" "Precisely. They call you the boy who lived. Dumbledore has spent years controlling your story. When you eventually return to their world, you'll need to understand the political landscape." "Return?" Harry looked up sharply. "I have to go back." Caius captured Harry's knight with a pawn he'd overlooked. "Eventually. Both worlds believe you have a destiny to fulfill. We're not preventing that destiny, merely ensuring you enter it prepared, not as Dumbledore's puppet. The idea of leaving Volterra someday filled Harry with mixed emotions. The Volturi castle had become his home, its inhabitants his unusual family. Jane and her twin brother Alec had become particularly important to Harry. Despite their fearsome reputations among vampires, they had developed a protective bond with the human boy. They were physically only a few years older than Harry, having been turned as young teens, though their actual ages spanned centuries. "Your move, little wizard," Alec prompted, watching Harry contemplate the chessboard. Harry grinned at the nickname before advancing his queen. "Check." Alec studied the board with surprise. "You're getting too good at this." He moved his king out of danger. "Jane and I were thinking we should show you Florence next weekend. You've been cooped up in the castle too long." Harry's eyes lit up. His outings were carefully managed to avoid drawing attention, but each trip into the human world was a treasured adventure. "Really?" Arrow approved it. After extensive security planning, Jane said, entering the room silently as only vampires could. "Felix, Dimitri, Alec and I will accompany you. We'll pose as your siblings." Harry laughed at the thought. With his dark hair and tanned skin, from training outdoors, he looked nothing like the pale, fair-haired vampire twins. "No one will believe that." "Foster siblings," Jane amended with a rare smile. "We're very cosmopolitan." The Florence trip became one of many carefully orchestrated outings. As Harry grew, the Volturi ensured he maintained connections to the human world, never becoming too isolated within vampire society. He visited museums, attended concerts, and was even enrolled briefly in a martial arts class in Siena, though his Volturi-trained abilities quickly surpassed the instructors, necessitating private lessons instead. By his 8th birthday, Harry spoke fluent Italian, passable French, and was learning Latin at Arrow's insistence, essential for understanding classic magical texts, dear boy. His magical abilities, while still developing, had progressed to reliable wandless control of objects, lights, and simple elements. "Your affinity seems to be for defensive and adaptive magic," Ileana noted during a testing session. "Protection charms, shields, environmental manipulation. Interesting for one so young." Harry, who had just successfully created a shield that repelled thrown objects, wiped sweat from his forehead. "Is that unusual?" Most young wizards show talent for direct magic first, making things float, change color, or explode when they're angry. Defensive magic usually comes later, with training. She studied him thoughtfully. "It speaks to your experiences, perhaps. You learned early to protect yourself." The Romanian witch had become something of a magical mentor to Harry, bridging his vampire education with traditional wizarding knowledge. She brought him books from magical communities, explained wizarding customs, and ensured he wouldn't be entirely alien when he eventually returned to that world. "Will I get a wand someday?" Harry asked her. "When the time comes," she promised. "Though you might find it limiting after all your wandless training." The balance of Harry's education was carefully maintained. While the Volturi ensured he understood vampire society, they were equally committed to preparing him for the wizarding world he would eventually need to navigate. On Harry's 9th birthday, Arrow presented him with an unexpected gift, a detailed dossier on Albus Dumbledore, compiled through various vampire contacts and magical sources. "Knowledge is power, young Harry," Arrow said as the boy leafed through the comprehensive file. "And knowledge of those who would control you is the most valuable kind." Harry read about Dumbledore's rise to prominence, his defeat of Grindelwald, his various positions of authority in the wizarding world, and, most interestingly, theories about his long-term goals and strategies. "He's been looking for me," Harry noted, finding reports of discreet inquiries throughout Britain. "But not very hard." "An interesting observation," Arrow agreed, folding his hands beneath his chin. "What do you conclude from that?" This was a familiar exercise, Arrow presenting Harry with information and challenging him to analyze it from multiple perspectives. The ancient vampire was teaching him to think like a strategist, like a Volturi. Harry considered carefully. 3 possibilities. 1. He knows I'm safe somewhere and is allowing it for now. 2. He doesn't actually want me found until it's time for me to attend Hogwarts. Or 3. He has some method of tracking me that doesn't require active searching. Arrow's pleased smile confirmed Harry's reasoning. And which do you consider most likely? The third option, Harry decided. The monitoring charms Ileana removed were sophisticated. He probably had ways to track my general status and location. But those were broken when we brought you here, Arrow reminded him. Which means? Harry's eyes widened slightly. He knows something happened, but not what. He's waiting to see what develops. Precisely. Arrow's red eyes glittered. A chess player recognizing that a piece has been moved unexpectedly. His next move will come when you turn 11, when your Hogwarts letter is due to arrive. Do I have to go? Harry asked quietly. The question had been hovering unspoken for years. Arrow's expression softened slightly. That, my boy, will be your choice. But consider this, if you remain here, you'll always be a wizard among vampires. If you return to Britain, attend their school, you'll have the opportunity to understand both worlds. And knowledge is power, Harry finished with a small smile. Indeed. Arrow stood, placing a cold hand briefly on Harry's shoulder. Besides, I believe you have unfinished business in the wizarding world. The fragment we removed from your scar suggests Lord Voldemort is not truly gone. Dumbledore knows this. It's why he's been planning so meticulously. Harry touched his scar, now just a faded lightning bolt. You think Voldemort will return? I think nothing in either of our worlds stays dead reliably. Arrow's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. When that day comes, you should be prepared, and have allies in both realms. The conversation marked a turning point in Harry's education. While his studies continued as before, greater emphasis was placed on wizarding Britain specifically, its government, social structures, important families, and recent history. Dimitri, whose tracking abilities made him an excellent intelligence gatherer, brought regular reports on the British wizarding community. Harry learned about the old pureblood families, the Ministry of Magic's operations, and the lingering divisions from the last war. The Malfoys, Knotts, and Parkinsons were all suspected Death Eater families who claimed to be under the Imperious curse after Voldemort fell, Dimitri explained, showing Harry photographs of prominent wizarding families. They've since regained political influence through strategic donations and alliances. Harry studied the moving wizarding photographs with fascination. And these others? The Weasleys, Bones, Longbottoms, fought against Voldemort. The Longbottom boy, Neville, lost his parents to torture, not unlike your situation. The Weasleys are numerous but politically marginalized due to their views and financial status. Susan Bones's aunt heads the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. This intelligence gathering extended to Hogwarts itself. Harry learned about the 4 houses, the professors, and the headmaster's various responsibilities and positions of power. Hogwarts isn't just a school, Heidi explained while helping Harry practice proper wizarding etiquette. The Volturi considered it essential he understand the formalities of pureblood society, even if he chose not to follow them. It's where alliances are formed that last lifetimes. The connections you make there will shape your future in their world. So I need to be strategic about friendships. Harry frowned, uncomfortable with the idea. You need to be aware, Heidi corrected gently. Form genuine connections, but understand their contexts. A Malfoy friendship carries different implications than a Weasley one. Neither is wrong, but each positions you differently in their society. As his 10th birthday approached, Harry's training intensified in all areas. Felix pushed his physical training harder, focusing on speed and evasion rather than direct confrontation. You'll never overpower an adult wizard or a vampire, Felix reminded him during a particularly grueling session, but you can outlast and outmaneuver them. Harry, drenched in sweat but determined, practiced disappearing into shadows, using environments to his advantage, and quick-strike techniques that targeted vulnerable points. His magical training evolved too. Without a proper wand, Harry couldn't learn standard spells, but his wandless abilities had developed remarkably. He could move objects with precision, create shields strong enough to deflect physical attacks, and even manipulate elements at a basic level, creating light, heat, or brief gusts of wind. "Your magic feels different from other wizards I've encountered," Ileana commented during one session. "Less structured, more intuitive. It's as if you're not casting spells so much as directly shaping magical energy." "Is that bad?" Harry asked, releasing the ball of light he'd been maintaining above his palm. "Not bad. Just unusual." She tapped her chin thoughtfully. "When you eventually get a wand and learn formal spells, you'll have both approaches at your disposal. That could be quite advantageous." Throughout it all, Harry's bond with the Volturi deepened. Despite their inhuman nature and occasionally frightening feeding habits, carefully hidden from Harry, though he understood the basics, they had become his family. Arrow, with his eccentric enthusiasm and ancient wisdom, had become a father figure. Marcus, quiet and observant, offered calm guidance. Even Caius, the most aggressive of the three, showed Harry a gruff affection. The guard members had their own relationships with the boy. Felix was his boisterous trainer, Dimitri his world-wise informant, Heidi his cultural guide. But Jane and Alec remained his closest companions, the siblings he'd never had. "Do you ever regret it?" Harry asked them one evening as they sat on the castle roof, watching stars appear above the Tuscan landscape. At 10, Harry was now only slightly shorter than the vampire twins. "Regret what?" Jane asked, though her expression suggested she knew. "Becoming vampires. Being turned so young." The twins exchanged a glance loaded with centuries of shared experience. "We were going to die," Alex said simply. "Burned as witches in a time when humans feared what they didn't understand. Arrow gave us life instead of fire." "But you'll never grow older," Harry persisted. "Never change." "Our bodies won't," Jane acknowledged, her childlike face serious in the moonlight. "But we've changed in other ways. Especially since you came." Harry raised an eyebrow questioningly. "You reminded us what it's like to see the world through new eyes," she explained. "When you live for centuries, it's easy to become fixed. Unchanging in your thoughts as well as your body." "You've been good for the Volturi," Alec added. "For all of us. You ask questions we stopped asking long ago." The conversation lingered in Harry's mind as his 11th birthday approached, the milestone that would mark his official entry into the wizarding world. The Volturi had already detected increased magical activity around both Privet Drive and Italy, suggesting that the wizarding authorities were preparing to locate the boy who lived. "They'll track the magic in your Hogwarts letter," Ileana explained during her final visit before the big day. "Wherever you are, it will find you. That's how they reach Muggle-born children who don't know about magic yet." "Will Dumbledore come himself?" Harry asked. After years of learning about the headmaster's manipulations, he felt both trepidation and curiosity about meeting the man. "Unlikely for a standard admission," she said. "Usually, it's the deputy headmistress for Muggleborns or the school owl for wizarding families. But given who you are, and the mystery of your disappearance..." She shrugged. "They might make an exception." Harry looked to Arrow, who had been listening silently. "What's our plan when the letter comes?" Arrow smiled, pleased by the collective hour. "We receive it graciously. You are, after all, entitled to your magical education. But we establish terms immediately. You attend as Harry Potter, ward of the Volturi, not as their abandoned savior." "Dumbledore won't like that," Harry noted. "Precisely why we must insist upon it." Arrow's smile widened. "The wizarding world has had its way with your narrative for 11 years. It's time they learned you have protectors who cannot be intimidated or obliviated." The plan had been discussed extensively among the Volturi leadership. Harry would attend Hogwarts, but with conditions, regular communication with Volterra, vampire guards disguised as human guardians during school breaks, and absolute transparency about his education and treatment. Dumbledore will resist, Caius had warned during planning sessions. He's accustomed to complete control of his school and students. Let him resist, Marcus had replied with unusual animation. The boy is ours as much as theirs. The bonds we've formed cannot be broken by a wizard's machinations. Now, as his birthday approached, Harry found himself both excited and anxious. The wizarding world represented his parents' legacy, his original heritage. But the Volturi were his chosen family, his protectors and mentors. You won't be losing us, Jane assured him, somehow sensing his unspoken worry. You're adding a world, not exchanging one for another. On the eve of his 11th birthday, Harry couldn't sleep. He wandered the castle corridors until he found himself at the door of Arrow's private study. A soft "enter" sounded before he could even knock, vampire hearing making privacy almost impossible in the castle. Arrow sat behind his ancient desk, a leather-bound journal open before him. Ah, young Harry. Anxious about tomorrow? Harry nodded, taking a seat across from the vampire lord. What if I'm not what they expect? I'm not the hero they've been telling stories about. No, Arrow agreed. You're far more interesting than that. You're a child raised by two worlds, with knowledge neither fully possesses. You understand vampire nature and wizard potential. You've learned strategy from immortals and magic from ancients. He closed his journal. You are unique, Harry Potter. And uniqueness is the most powerful position of all. Harry considered this. I don't want to disappoint you. After everything you've done for me. My dear boy, Arrow's voice softened to a degree few had ever heard, you could only disappoint me by becoming what others have planned for you instead of what you choose to be. He leaned forward. Remember this always, destiny is a cage only if you accept its limitations. Prophecies and expectations are others' interpretations of possibility, not absolute truth. The conversation steadied Harry. By the time he finally fell asleep in the early morning hours, he felt prepared for whatever the day might bring. He awoke to a tapping at his window, an ordinary-looking owl holding an envelope of heavy parchment, addressed in emerald green ink, Mr. H. Potter, the East Tower Suite, Volturi Castle, Volterra, Italy. The wizarding world had found him at last. The Hogwarts letter sparked a flurry of activity in Volterra. The Volturi, accustomed to operating in shadows, now faced direct interaction with wizard authorities. Messages were exchanged, positions established, and preparations made for Harry's transition back to British Wizarding Society. Minerva McGonagall, not Albus Dumbledore, arrived in Volterra 3 days after Harry received his letter. The stern Scottish witch was clearly unprepared for what she found, not a lost, mistreated boy, but a confident, well-educated young man surrounded by protective vampires. This is highly irregular, she said after introductions in the castle's receiving room, her Scottish accent more pronounced with stress. Mr. Potter was meant to be with his relatives in Surrey. The relatives who kept him in a cupboard? Jane asked sweetly, her childlike appearance belying the danger in her tone. McGonagall's lips thinned. I expressed concerns about those muggles from the beginning. Not that anyone listened. Harry, seated between Arrow and Marcus with the guards standing protectively nearby, studied the witch carefully. According to their intelligence, McGonagall was strict but fair, loyal to Dumbledore but not blindly so. Professor, he said politely, I've been very happy here. The Volturi rescued me from neglect and have given me a home and education. McGonagall's expression softened slightly as she looked at Harry. You do appear well, Mr. Potter. Though your situation is unprecedented. Vampire guardianship of a wizard child. She shook her head. The ministry will have questions. And we shall have answers, Arrow replied smoothly. Harry's well-being has been our primary concern these past 6 years. We've ensured his connection to his magical heritage while protecting him from those who would use him for their own purposes. The pointed comment wasn't lost on McGonagall. Dumbledore had his reasons for the arrangements he made. Yes, Marcus spoke, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. We've discerned many of those reasons. Some were even benevolent. The tension in the room was palpable. Harry decided to redirect the conversation. "Professor, I'd very much like to attend Hogwarts," he said earnestly. "I want to learn about my parents and my magical heritage. But the Volturi are my family now. I won't pretend otherwise." McGonagall studied him for a long moment. "You have your mother's eyes," she said finally. "But I see little of the infant I remember. You've grown up differently than any of us imagined, Mr. Potter." "Better," Felix muttered from his position by the wall. McGonagall chose not to acknowledge the comment. Instead, she removed several documents from her robes. "These are the standard Hogwarts enrollment materials. Term begins September 1st. Students typically purchase supplies in Diagon Alley in London. We've made arrangements to visit next week," Harry informed her. "Jane and Alec will accompany me as my siblings, with Felix and Dimitri as guardian figures." The professor's eyebrows rose at the detailed planning. "I see you've thought this through." "We leave little to chance where Harry is concerned," Arrow said, his tone pleasant but firm. The meeting continued with discussions of practical matters, Harry's living arrangements during holidays, communication protocols, and financial considerations. McGonagall was clearly uncomfortable with vampire involvement but professional throughout. Before leaving, she had a moment alone with Harry at Arrow's surprising suggestion. "Mr. Potter," she said once the others had moved to the far side of the room, maintaining a pretense of privacy, "I want to be clear. Whatever circumstances brought you here, my concern is for your education and well-being at Hogwarts. If you ever need assistance, my door is always open." Harry nodded. "Thank you, Professor. I appreciate that. And I am looking forward to attending Hogwarts, despite the complicated situation." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Life is frequently complicated, Mr. Potter. Especially for exceptional individuals." She glanced toward the vampires. "I confess I never imagined the boy who lived would be raised by the Volturi of all beings, but you seem remarkably well adjusted given the circumstances." "They've been good to me," Harry said simply. "Better than the Dursleys ever were." Something flashed in McGonagall's eyes, regret, perhaps, or anger. "Yes, well. That situation was never what I would have chosen." She straightened. "I shall see you at Hogwarts, Mr. Potter. Do try to stay out of trouble until then." After she departed, Arrow was unusually thoughtful. "Minerva McGonagall may prove a valuable ally. She has her own mind, despite her loyalty to Dumbledore." "She seemed surprised by how normal I am," Harry observed. "Like she expected me to be wild or traumatized or something." "Wizards have many prejudices about vampires," Caius said dismissively. "They imagine we're all savage beasts with no culture or restraint." "To be fair," Alec pointed out, "some of us are exactly that." The week before their planned trip to London was filled with final preparations. Harry reviewed everything the Volturi had taught him about wizarding Britain, particularly its social and political landscapes. "The goblins at Gringotts must be treated with respect," Heidi reminded him. "Unlike many wizards, we recognize them as worthy allies and formidable enemies. And the old families will be watching for your arrival," Dimitri added. "News that Harry Potter is shopping for school supplies will spread quickly. Be prepared for attention." Jane and Alec, who would pose as Harry's adoptive siblings, practiced moderating their vampire traits, remembering to blink, mimicking human breathing patterns, and moving at human speeds. Their red eyes would be concealed with special contact lenses that Volturi had developed for interactions with humans. The journey to London itself was carefully orchestrated. Rather than traveling directly to magical areas, which might trigger monitoring spells, they entered Britain through normal human channels with impeccable documentation provided by the Volturi's human associates. They arrived at the Leaky Cauldron on a warm August morning. Harry, dressed in high-quality Muggle clothing, entered the famous wizarding pub flanked by Jane and Alec, with Felix and Dimitri following protectively. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped as heads turned toward them. "Bless my soul," the barkeeper breathed. "It's Harry Potter." Whispers erupted throughout the pub. People stood for a better look, some moving toward him with hands outstretched. Felix stepped smoothly in front of Harry. "Please give Mr. Potter space," he said, his voice pleasant but carrying unmistakable authority. "We're just here to shop for school supplies," Harry added with a polite smile, projecting confidence despite the uncomfortable attention. Tom the barkeeper hurried forward. Of course. Through the back, sir, I'll open the passage to Diagon Alley for you." As they followed Tom to the back courtyard, Harry maintained his composed expression while taking in every detail. This was his first direct contact with Wizarding Britain, the world his parents had lived and died in, the society that had labeled him their savior without knowing the first thing about him. The brick wall rearranged itself into an archway, revealing the bustling magical street beyond. Harry couldn't help the genuine smile that spread across his face at the sight. Books and intelligence reports were one thing, but experiencing the vibrant reality of Diagon Alley was another entirely. "First stop, Gringotts," Dimitri murmured, guiding their group through the crowd, which parted before them, partly due to recognition of Harry, partly due to the unconscious human response to predators in their midst. The Goblin Bank stood imposing at the far end of the alley. As they approached, Harry recalled everything he'd learned about Goblin customs and respect. Inside, he addressed the first available teller with a slight bow. "May your gold flow and your enemies falter," Harry said in clear, precise gobbledygook, a language Arrow had insisted he learn basics of, describing it as invaluable for a wizard who wishes to be taken seriously by the financial powers. The goblin's eyes widened fractionally, the equivalent of open-mouthed shock for their species. "Mr. Potter, I presume," he replied in English. "Your account manager will want to speak with you. It has been many years since the Potter vaults were accessed." Harry was led to a private office while his vampire family waited in an antechamber. The meeting with Blood Fong, the Potter account manager, was enlightening. Harry learned about his family's financial status, considerable, properties, several, and inheritance, complicated by his unusual guardianship situation. The goblins recognized the Volturi as legitimate magical authorities, Blood Fong explained, examining ancient documents. "Your residence with them supersedes ministry interference with your accounts. However, certain family heirlooms and properties will only become available upon your majority." Harry left with a new money pouch connected directly to his trust vault, a portfolio of investments to review, and the satisfaction of having established himself as more than just a famous name to the Goblin Nation. The rest of their shopping proceeded methodically. At Madame Malkin's, Harry was fitted for robes alongside a blonde boy who introduced himself as Draco Malfoy. The Volturi intelligence on the Malfoy family flashed through Harry's mind as they exchanged pleasantries. "I've been expecting to meet you for years," Draco said with poorly concealed curiosity. "Everyone's wondered where you've been. Father said you were being trained in secret, but no one knew by whom." His eyes darted to Jane and Alec, who were browsing nearby. "Are they your family now?" Harry smiled politely. "Something like that. I've been raised abroad. It's my first time back in Britain since I was an infant." "You don't seem very British," Draco observed. "Italian influence," Harry replied smoothly. "Where will you be sorted at Hogwarts?" "Family tradition, isn't it?" The conversation shifted to houses, Quidditch, and other school matters. Harry maintained friendly but reserved interactions, neither encouraging nor discouraging a potential alliance with the Malfoy heir. It was exactly the balanced approach the Volturi had coached him on, gathering information while keeping his own options open. Similar encounters occurred throughout the day. At Flourish and Blots, he met the Weasley family, a red-headed group whose warm welcome contrasted sharply with their obvious financial constraints. In the magical menagerie, he briefly crossed paths with Neville Longbottom and his formidable grandmother, who regarded Harry with keen interest. The most significant moment, however, came at Ollivander's. The wand-maker's shop was empty when their group entered, but the ancient proprietor emerged from the shadows immediately, his silver eyes fixed on Harry. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Potter," he said softly. "Though I confess, I did not anticipate your companions." His gaze drifted to the vampires with an expression of fascination rather than fear. The process of finding Harry's wand proved lengthy and increasingly dramatic. Wand after wand produced unsatisfactory results, some doing nothing at all, others creating explosive reactions. Ollivander seemed more delighted with each failure. "Tricky customer. Wonderful," he exclaimed, disappearing into the back of his shop once more. Jane raised an eyebrow at Harry. "Is all wizarding shopping this theatrical?" Harry shrugged, though he was growing concerned. What if no wand chose him? Had his unorthodox magical training somehow affected his compatibility? Ollivander returned with a dusty box. "I wonder," he murmured, opening it to reveal a holly wand. An unusual combination, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. The moment Harry's fingers closed around the wand, he felt a rush of power unlike anything in his wandless practice. Gold and silver sparks shot from the tip, illuminating the shop. But there was something else, a strange resonance, a familiarity that made his scar tingle. Ollivander's expression turned solemn. "Curious, very curious." "What's curious?" Harry asked, though Demetri's slight head shake suggested he already knew. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. The phoenix who gave the feather for your wand gave just one other. Its brother." He touched Harry's scar lightly, "Gave you that." The implications hung heavy in the air. Harry's wand was the brother to Voldemort's. "Does this mean something specific?" Harry asked carefully. "It means we can expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible, but great." The encounter left Harry thoughtful as they completed their shopping. Back at their temporary London lodgings, a vampire-owned property in Belgravia, he examined his wand more carefully. A connection to Voldemort, Arrow mused when Harry explained Ollivander's revelation. Fascinating. First the soul fragment, now this wand relationship. The universe seems determined to link you two. "I don't want to be linked to him," Harry said firmly. "He murdered my parents." "Connections don't determine destiny, little wizard," Alec reminded him. "They only create potential paths. The choices remain yours." The remainder of August passed in a blur of preparation. Harry practiced basic spells with his new wand, finding that his years of wandless training gave him unusual control but sometimes unpredictable results. His magic, accustomed to flowing directly from his intent, occasionally overwhelmed the wand's channeling capability. "You'll need to recalibrate your approach," Ileana advised during a final training session. "Think of your wand not as a tool but as a partner. It wants to work with you, but you must respect its nature." As September 1st approached, the Volturi finalized their arrangements for Harry's departure. Felix and Dimitri would accompany him to King's Cross Station, maintaining their roles as his guardians. Jane and Alec would return to Italy but planned regular visits during school holidays. The night before his departure, the Volturi gathered for a formal farewell dinner, a rare event where human food was served alongside blood goblets for the vampires. Harry, seated at Arrow's right hand, felt a complex mixture of excitement and melancholy. "Tomorrow, you begin a new chapter," Arrow announced, raising his goblet. "You enter the wizarding world not as their lost child, but as our representative, a bridge between ancient societies. Remember all we have taught you, trust your instincts, and know that Volterra remains your home and sanctuary." To Harry Potter, Marcus added, his usually expressionless face showing genuine affection. "May you find your path. And confound Dumbledore at every turn," Caius concluded with a predatory smile. As the gathering continued, Harry found a moment alone with Jane and Alec on the castle terrace. The Italian night was warm, stars glittering above the medieval town below. I'm going to miss you both, Harry admitted. It's strange to think I won't see you every day. We're only a fire call away, Jane reminded him, referencing the special communication system they'd arranged. And we'll visit at Christmas. Besides, Alec added with a smirk, we've had you for 6 years. It's only fair the wizards get their turn. Harry laughed, but sobered quickly. What if I change? What if being back in that world makes me different? The vampire twins exchanged a glance. You will change, Jane said matter-of-factly. That's what living does, even to vampires if they're paying attention. But your core, who you are beneath the surface, that doesn't change easily. And if it does, Alec added, make sure it changes because you want it to, not because someone else is pulling strings. Harry nodded, taking comfort in their pragmatic wisdom. The conversation turned to lighter topics, predictions about Hogwarts, reminders about which professors to watch carefully, jokes about whether Harry would be sorted into Slytherin, Arrow would be so proud. By the time Harry finally went to bed, he felt as prepared as he could be for the journey ahead. The years with the Volturi had transformed him from an unwanted, neglected child into someone confident and capable. Whatever Dumbledore had planned for Harry Potter, he would find a very different boy than he expected. Morning arrived with nervous energy. Harry dressed in casual Muggle clothes that would transition well to his uniform on the train. His trunk, an elegant Italian leather piece with extensive extension and protection charms, contained everything he would need for the school year, including several items the average wizard student wouldn't possess. The journey to King's Cross was uneventful. Felix and Dimitri, dressed impeccably as wealthy businessmen, attracted appreciative glances from women and envious ones from men as they escorted Harry through the station toward platform 9 3/4. Remember, Dimitri said quietly as they approached the barrier, observe everything, reveal little. First impressions matter. And if Dumbledore tries to interfere with our communication arrangements, contact us immediately, Felix added. The mirror in your trunk bypasses standard monitoring spells. Harry nodded, drawing a deep breath. I'm ready. He stepped through the barrier onto platform 9 3/4, where the Hogwarts Express waited in a cloud of steam. Families crowded the platform, emotional parents, excited children, hooting owls, and meowing cats creating a cacophony of sound and activity. For a brief moment, Harry felt a pang of something like envy watching ordinary wizard families say goodbye. Then he glanced back at his vampire guardians and remembered that family came in many forms. His might be unconventional, but it was no less real for that. Right after the sorting, Felix reminded him with a rough pat on the shoulder that would have staggered a normal child. Arrow will want details. And try not to reveal everything you know immediately, Dimitri advised. Strategic advantage comes from being underestimated. Harry grinned. I learned from the best. He hugged them both quickly, an action that still felt slightly strange given vampire physiology but had become their norm over the years. As the train whistle blew, Harry boarded with his trunk, finding an empty compartment near the rear. He waved to Felix and Dimitri through the window as the train began to move. Whatever awaited him at Hogwarts, he faced it not as the abandoned orphan Dumbledore had intended, but as Harry Potter of the Volturi, educated, prepared, and very much his own person. The Hogwarts Express pulled away from the station, carrying Harry toward his magical heritage and the next phase of a life that had already defied all expectations. Chapter 2, Two Worlds. The Hogwarts Express rattled across the British countryside as Harry settled into his compartment. He'd chosen one at the far end of the train, strategic positioning the Volturi would approve of. Somewhere with a good view of approaching visitors but only one entrance to monitor. He'd barely opened A History of Magic when the compartment door slid open. A girl with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth stood in the doorway, already dressed in her Hogwarts robes. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one, she said in a bossy sort of voice. Harry closed his book. No toads here. Have you tried a summoning charm? The girl looked surprised. We can't do magic outside school. And anyway, I've only tried a few simple spells myself, though they've all worked for me. We're on the train to Hogwarts, Harry pointed out. It counts as part of the school. And a simple, Accio toad might save you searching every compartment. The girl's eyes widened. That's a fourth-year spell. I've read about it, but, Harry took out his wand, focusing on intent like Ileana had taught him, moderating his power through the wand rather than pushing directly with his mind. Accio Neville's toad, he said clearly. They waited. Nothing happened. It didn't, the girl started, but Harry held up a hand. Distance and specificity, he explained. If the toad is too far away or if there are barriers, a loud thump against the window interrupted him. A fat toad had smacked into the glass from outside, apparently having been summoned straight through an open window elsewhere on the train. The girl gasped while Harry slid the window open, plucking the dazed toad from where it clung to the glass. I should have been more careful about directional parameters, he said ruefully. The girl stared at him. That was, your. Her eyes flicked to his forehead where his hair had shifted, revealing his scar. You're Harry Potter. And you are, he asked, holding the squirming toad. Hermione Granger. She thrust out her hand formally. Nobody in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter. Harry shook her hand. Nice to meet you. Shall we find Neville and return his escape artist? As they walked through the train, Hermione peppered Harry with questions. I've read all about you, of course. You're in modern magical history, the rise and fall of the dark arts, and great wizarding events of the 20th century. I know. They're mostly wrong, Harry replied, scanning compartments for the toad's owner. Wrong? Hermione looked shocked at the suggestion that books could contain errors. The authors made assumptions based on limited information. None of them actually interviewed me, obviously. Before she could respond, a round-faced boy spotted them and cried out in relief. Trevor. He reached for the toad Harry was carrying. Thank you. He keeps getting away from me. Thank Harry Potter, Hermione said importantly. He summoned him with magic. The boy's eyes grew round. You're Harry Potter. Gran told me all about how you vanished years ago. Everyone thought you were being trained in secret by the ministry or something. Harry smiled. This was his chance to establish his narrative before rumors took over. Nothing that dramatic. I was raised in Italy by an extended family. They taught me magic and other subjects. Italy? Neville looked confused. But I thought you lived with Muggles. I did, briefly. It didn't work out. Harry kept his tone neutral. The Dursleys weren't equipped to raise a magical child. A commotion further down the train caught their attention, raised voices and laughter. They found a compartment where a group of boys were tormenting a small owl, levitating it out of reach of a red-headed boy who was jumping to retrieve it. Harry assessed the situation instantly. 4 against 1, clear bullying dynamic, public humiliation tactic. The Volturi had taught him to recognize power plays in all forms. He drew his wand smoothly, focusing on the owl. With a flick and silent intent, he cancelled the levitation charm. The owl dropped into his free hand as he stepped forward. Problem here? Harry asked mildly, stroking the tiny, trembling owl with one finger. The largest boy turned, scowling. Who asked you to? The words died as he recognized Harry's scar. You're Harry Potter, one of the other boys whispered. Harry handed the owl to the red-headed boy. Here you go. Thanks, the boy said, his ears reddening. I'm Ron. Ron Weasley. Marcus Flint, the large boy introduced himself, his tone suddenly shifting to ingratiating. These are Warrington, Montague, and Pusey. We were just having a bit of fun. Harry gave them a look he'd learned from Caius, cold assessment without obvious disapproval. I see. Flint shifted uncomfortably. We didn't know the bird belonged to a friend of yours. We just met, actually, Harry replied, still using that mild tone that somehow made the older boys step back slightly. But I find unnecessary cruelty distasteful. There was an awkward silence before Flint muttered something about finding their friends, and the group departed. Slytherins, Ron said with disgust once they'd gone. The whole lot of them are trouble. Harry raised an eyebrow. Because of their house? Or their actions? Ron looked confused. Both? Everyone knows Slytherins where dark wizards come from. That's not entirely accurate, Hermione interjected. While Slytherin has produced more dark wizards than other houses, correlation doesn't imply causation. Harry smiled slightly. Well put. He turned to Ron. I don't know much about Hogwarts houses from personal experience. My family didn't attend. What family in Italy? Ron asked bluntly. Everyone says you disappeared after you know who killed your parents. Harry decided on selective honesty. I was adopted by a family in Volterra. They're old magical blood, very traditional in some ways, progressive in others. Volterra? Hermione perked up. The medieval walled city in Tuscany? I visited with my parents last summer. We didn't see any magical community there. They're good at remaining hidden, Harry said with a small smile. They have to be. The conversation shifted to Hogwarts houses, with Ron adamantly promoting Gryffindor and dismissing Slytherin, while Hermione thought Ravenclaw sounded best. Neville hoped for Hufflepuff, though Gran would be disappointed. Harry listened more than he spoke, gathering valuable data about house perceptions and student dynamics. When the trolley which came by, he bought treats for everyone, a small gesture of goodwill that Felix had taught him could establish positive associations. As they approached Hogwarts, Harry excused himself to change into his robes. Alone in the compartment, he took a moment to center himself as Arrow had taught him. The first real test of his years of preparation was about to begin. The great hall blazed with floating candles as Professor McGonagall led the first years between long house tables. Harry heard whispers following him, his name rippling through the crowd as students craned for a glimpse of their long-lost celebrity. He kept his posture relaxed but dignified, eyes forward but aware of everything around him. The enchanted ceiling, the head table where Dumbledore sat watching the procession with particular interest, the house ghosts drifting between tables. The Sorting Hat's song told the familiar story of the four houses. When it finished, McGonagall began calling students forward alphabetically. Harry observed each sorting carefully, noting which students went where. Hermione went to Gryffindor after nearly a minute under the hat. Neville, too, joined Gryffindor despite his earlier comments about Hufflepuff. Draco Malfoy was sent to Slytherin before the hat even touched his head. Potter, Harry. The hall went silent, then erupted in whispers as Harry walked calmly to the stool. Before the hat dropped over his eyes, he caught a glimpse of Dumbledore leaning forward with undisguised interest. Well, a small voice said in his ear. What have we here? Oh my, this is different. Very different indeed. Harry waited, keeping his mind open but guarded as Ileana had taught him. Interesting defenses, the hat mused. Not many 11-year-olds know occlumency basics. But I can see past them, it's my job, after all. Let's see, raised by vampires. The Volturi, no less. Albus will be quite surprised. I'd prefer if you kept that information private, Harry thought firmly. The hat chuckled. Your secrets are safe with me. I'm bound not to reveal what I see in students' minds. Now, where to put you? You've got courage, certainly. A sharp mind, too. Loyalty to those who've earned it. And ambition, yes, with the cunning to match. Harry remained silent, curious what the hat would decide. You don't have a preference? Most students do. I'd like to go where I can best forge my own path, Harry replied mentally. Not where people expect me to be based on my name. Forging your own path, breaking expectations, with your particular education, better be Ravenclaw." The last word was shouted to the hall. There was a moment of stunned silence before the Ravenclaw table erupted in cheers and applause. Harry removed the hat, catching Dumbledore's surprised expression before the headmaster composed his features into a benign smile. The Ravenclaw prefect, Penelope Clearwater, made space for Harry as he approached their table. "Welcome to Ravenclaw, Potter." "Bit of a surprise, everyone expected you'd be a Gryffindor like your parents." "I'm not my parents," Harry said simply, accepting congratulations from his new housemates. From across the hall, he saw Ron looking disappointed at the Gryffindor table, while at the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy was watching him with newfound interest. The feast that followed was magnificent, though Harry found himself missing the simplicity of Italian cuisine after years in Volterra. He engaged his housemates in conversation, asking questions that positioned him as knowledgeable but not arrogant. When asked directly about his disappearance and reappearance, he gave the same basic narrative he'd established on the train: adopted by a magical family in Italy, educated privately, looking forward to experiencing Hogwarts. After dessert, Dumbledore rose for announcements, standard rules, a warning about the forbidden third-floor corridor, painful death raised Harry's eyebrows, and finally the school song. As the prefects gathered first-years to lead them to dormitories, Harry felt a gentle probe against his mental shields, not forceful enough to be an attack, more like someone testing a door to see if it was locked. He traced the sensation to Dumbledore, who was watching him over half-moon spectacles. Harry strengthened his shield subtly, just enough to rebuff the probe without revealing the full extent of his occlumency training. The pressure withdrew, but Dumbledore's gaze remained thoughtful. The Ravenclaw common room was located in a tower, protected by a bronze eagle knocker that posed riddles instead of requiring passwords. "What gets bigger the more you take away?" it asked as they approached. "A hole," several older students answered in unison. The door swung open to reveal a circular room with graceful arched windows, blue and bronze silks, and walls lined with bookshelves. A white marble statue of Rowena Ravenclaw wore a delicate diadem. "Girls' dormitories to the right, boys to the left," Prefect Clearwater explained. "First years are on the first level up the spiral staircase." The dormitory contained 5 four-poster beds with blue hangings and bronze trim. Harry found his trunk already placed beside one bed near a window overlooking the lake. His roommates introduced themselves: Terry Boot, Michael Corner, Anthony Goldstein, and Kevin Entwistle. "So what's it like in Italy?" Terry asked as they unpacked. "Do they have different magic there?" Harry nodded. "Some traditions are different. Italian magic has stronger connections to ancient Roman practices, and there's more emphasis on wandless techniques." "Wandless?" Anthony looked skeptical. "That's really advanced stuff." Harry shrugged. "It's just taught earlier there. Different educational philosophy." He deliberately avoided demonstrating any wandless abilities that first night. The Volturi had been clear: reveal capabilities gradually, establish baseline expectations before exceeding them. Once his dorm mates were asleep, Harry silently cast privacy charms around his bed, not Hogwarts standard ones that any professor could bypass, but specialized Volturi variants designed to prevent eavesdropping. From a hidden compartment in his trunk, he removed a small obsidian mirror. "Volterra," he whispered. The mirror's surface rippled, then cleared to show Arrow's smiling face. "Ah, young Harry. We've been waiting to hear from you. How was your journey?" "You're sorting." Harry quickly reported the day's events, including his Ravenclaw placement and Dumbledore's subtle mental probe. "Ravenclaw," Arrow mused. "Unexpected by their standards, perhaps, but quite fitting. Knowledge is power, after all." His expression hardened slightly. "And Dumbledore attempted legilimency on a child?" "How predictable." "It wasn't forceful," Harry clarified. "More like a test." "A test you passed," Arrow nodded approvingly. "Remember, reveal only what serves your purposes. Dumbledore is accustomed to knowing everything about his students. Your mystery will unsettle him." After promising to report again in a few days, Harry ended the communication and settled into bed, mentally reviewing the day. His introduction to Hogwarts had gone largely according to plan, with his sorting being the major deviation. But Ravenclaw might actually serve his purposes better than Gryffindor or Slytherin, less preconceived expectations, more intellectual freedom. Tomorrow would bring classes, professors, and almost certainly a meeting with the headmaster. Harry fell asleep planning his approach to each. Breakfast in the Great Hall brought a flurry of schedules and first-day excitement. Harry's fellow Ravenclaws were already discussing classes and textbooks, comparing notes on professors' reputations. Snape favors Slytherin, Lisa Turpin informed the first years. McGonagall's strict but fair. Flitwick, our head of house, is brilliant with charms. Harry was buttering toast when a shadow fell across his plate. Looking up, he found Professor Flitwick himself beaming at him. Mr. Potter. Delighted to have you in Ravenclaw. I knew your mother, you know. Lily was gifted with charms, I always thought she should have been in my house. Thank you, Professor, Harry replied politely. I look forward to your class. Flitwick handed him his schedule. The headmaster would like a word with you after breakfast. Just a welcome chat, nothing to worry about. The gargoyle password is acid pops. As the tiny professor moved along the table, Terry leaned over. Meeting the headmaster on day one. You really are famous. Harry gave a noncommittal hum. Just formalities, I'm sure. After breakfast, Harry made his way to the gargoyle statue Flitwick had described. Acid pops, he said, and the statue leapt aside, revealing a spiral staircase. The headmaster's office was a circular room filled with silver instruments, portraits of former headmasters, and bookshelves crammed with ancient tomes. Fawkes the Phoenix sat on a golden perch, regarding Harry with intelligent eyes. Ah, Harry. Dumbledore rose from behind his desk. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. Harry took the offered seat, maintaining polite eye contact without opening himself to mental intrusion. Good morning, Professor. Lemon drop? Dumbledore offered a small dish of candies. No, thank you. Harry had been warned by the Volturi about accepting food or drink from powerful wizards, not because they expected outright poison, but because potions could be disguised in many forms. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. I must say, you've caused quite a stir with your return to Britain. Many of us have wondered where you've been all these years. I understand there was concern, Harry acknowledged. But I've been well cared for. Yes, so it seems. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. Professor McGonagall mentioned your unusual guardianship situation. An Italian family, I believe. Harry nodded. They took me in when I was 5, after finding me with the Dursleys. He let just enough emphasis fall on finding to communicate awareness of his previous circumstances. I see. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. I placed you with your aunt and uncle for important reasons, Harry. There were protective measures based on your mother's sacrifice, blood wards that kept you safe from Voldemort's followers. Were there protective measures against the Dursleys themselves? Harry asked mildly. Dumbledore blinked, momentarily taken aback. I had Arabella Figg living nearby to keep an eye on things. She reported no serious concerns. Living in a cupboard under the stairs might not have looked serious from outside the house, Harry observed. Neither would missed meals or Dudley's favorite game, Harry hunting. A flash of something like guilt crossed Dumbledore's face before he regained his composure. I am truly sorry if you suffered there, Harry. My intention was only to keep you safe. I understand intentions can be good even when results aren't, Harry said, echoing one of Marcus's frequent observations. But that's the past. I'm here now to learn magic properly. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Indeed. Though I must confess some concern about your current guardians. The magical community in Volterra is reclusive. Little is known about their practices or beliefs. Harry maintained a neutral expression. They value knowledge, tradition, and self-determination. They've taught me both magical and non-magical subjects. I've been happy with them. And yet they sent you to Hogwarts rather than Beauxbatons or another continental school. My parents attended Hogwarts, Harry said simply. I wanted to understand that part of my heritage. Dumbledore seemed to accept this, changing tactics. You seem remarkably poised for your age, Harry. And your Ravenclaw sorting surprised many who expected you to follow your parents into Gryffindor. The hat considers the individual, not their ancestry, Harry replied. At least, that's my understanding. Quite right, Dumbledore conceded with a small smile. Well, I won't keep you from your first day of classes. Please know my door is always open should you need anything. Harry stood. Thank you, Headmaster. May I ask one question? Of course. Why is there a deadly corridor in a school full of children? Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Ah. The third floor. Rest assured, Harry, the warning was necessary but the danger is contained. Some matters require security that might seem extreme to those not privy to all details. Harry nodded as if this made perfect sense, though internally he was cataloguing the non-answer. I understand. Thank you for your time. As he left the office, Harry replayed the conversation mentally. Dumbledore had revealed little while trying to extract information. The headmaster was clearly surprised by Harry's composure and awareness of his past mistreatment, but had avoided addressing it directly. And the third-floor mystery remained exactly that. His first class, Charms with Professor Flitwick, proved instructive in a different way. After calling roll, and falling off his stack of books when he reached Harry's name, Flitwick began with basic wand movements and the levitation charm theory. Harry took notes diligently, though he already knew the material. When it came time to practice, he deliberately moderated his performance, making the feather float on his third attempt rather than his first, using the standard incantation despite knowing how to cast silently. Excellent work, Mr. Potter. Flitwick squeaked. 5 points to Ravenclaw for a perfect first levitation. Hermione Granger, partnered with Ron Weasley at a nearby desk, accomplished the feat shortly after Harry. Her eyes met his across the room with a mixture of competitiveness and curiosity. Transfiguration with McGonagall followed similar patterns. Harry succeeded in turning his match into a needle, but not immediately and not perfectly. McGonagall gave him an approving nod but seemed distracted, watching him with a thoughtful expression throughout the lesson. It was in potions that Harry's strategy faced its first real challenge. Snape swept into the dungeon classroom, robes billowing dramatically. His opening speech about bottling fame and brewing glory was delivered with theatrical precision. Then his dark eyes fixed on Harry. Potter, he said softly. Our new celebrity. Harry met his gaze steadily, feeling the brush of legitimacy against his shields. Unlike Dumbledore's gentle probe, Snape's was sharper, more focused. Tell me, Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry recognized the question as far beyond first-year curriculum. Draught of living death, sir, he answered promptly. A powerful sleeping potion. Snape's eyes narrowed slightly. Where would you look if I told you to find a bezoar? The stomach of a goat, sir. It's an antidote to most poisons. What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, sir. Also called aconite. A heavy silence fell over the classroom. Snape's expression was unreadable as he stared at Harry. It seems fame isn't everything, he finally said. 1 point to Ravenclaw for adequate preparation. The backhanded compliment and minimal point award made several students exchange glances, but Harry simply nodded acknowledgement. The Volturi intelligence on Snape had suggested a complex history with Harry's parents, particularly his father. Antagonizing the man would serve no purpose. Throughout the lesson, Harry worked methodically, producing a nearly perfect boil-cure potion. When Snape passed his cauldron, he merely sniffed and moved on without comment, high praise by the potions master's standards, apparently. After classes ended that day, Harry found a secluded corner of the library to send a coded letter to Volterra using a school owl. While the mirror communication was secure, written correspondence required more caution. The Volturi had established a system using seemingly innocent Italian phrases that conveyed specific meanings about Harry's situation. Over the next weeks, a rhythm developed. Harry excelled in classes without drawing undue attention, established friendly relationships with housemates without revealing too much about himself, and observed the dynamics of Hogwarts with the analytical eye the Volturi had cultivated. He maintained regular contact with Volterra, reporting everything from professor assessments to student politics. Arrow was particularly interested in Quirrell, the defense against the dark arts professor whose stuttering seemed exaggerated and whose turbaned head gave off strange magical resonances that Harry could sometimes detect. Trust your instincts, Arrow advised through the mirror. Your sensitivity to magical signatures is unusual for a wizard your age. If something feels wrong about this professor, maintain distance while gathering information. Harry also began careful investigations into the third-floor corridor mystery. By Halloween, he'd pieced together that something valuable was being guarded, something moved from Gringotts just before a break-in reported in the Daily Prophet. Hagrid's accidental comments about Nicholas Flamel during a tea visit provided another clue. The Philosopher's Stone, Jane said immediately when Harry mentioned the name during their mirror call. Flamel is the only known creator of a true Philosopher's Stone. It turns base metal to gold and produces the elixir of life. Why would such an object be hidden in a school? Harry wondered. Alec's face appeared beside Jane's in the mirror. It's bait, he said flatly. Someone wants the stone, and Dumbledore is using it to lure them out. With children as collateral damage if things go wrong. This disturbing theory gained credence on Halloween night when a mountain troll somehow entered the castle. While the other students panicked, Harry noticed Quirrell's theatrical announcement and subsequent faint, and the fact that Snape slipped away during the commotion. Rather than following his prefects to Ravenclaw Tower, Harry quietly broke away, suspecting the troll was a diversion. He disillusioned himself, a charm Ileana had insisted he master, and made his way toward the third-floor corridor. Sure enough, he found Snape already there, heading off Quirrell who was approaching the forbidden door. The two professors exchanged tense words before Quirrell retreated. Harry noticed blood on Snape's leg before the potions master limped away. Harry reported this to Volterra that night. Someone's after the stone, he concluded. Quirrell seems the obvious suspect, but it could be a misdirection. Or Quirrell could be a vessel for someone else, Marcus suggested, his ancient face grave in the mirror's reflection. There are dark rituals that allow possession or parasitic inhabitation. This possibility hadn't occurred to Harry. You think Voldemort? It's one theory among many, Arrow interjected smoothly. Continue observing, but do not confront directly. Your safety is paramount. As winter approached, Harry expanded his social connections, deliberately building relationships across house lines. He studied with Hermione Granger, whose initial bossiness had mellowed after a troll incident where she was nearly killed before being rescued by Ron Weasley. The near-death experience had forged an unlikely friendship between the two Gryffindors. Harry also engaged in chess matches with Ron, Quidditch discussions with students from all houses, and even cautious interactions with Draco Malfoy during paired assignments. Unlike many of his peers, Harry refused to let house boundaries dictate his associations. You're friendly with everyone but close to no one, Terry observed one evening in their dormitory. Very political. Harry smiled slightly. I'm just getting to know people before making judgments. Spoken like a true Ravenclaw, Anthony said approvingly. Though sometimes I think the hat could have put you in Slytherin. It considered it, Harry admitted. Among other options. This casual revelation sparked a dormitory discussion about house traits and sorting theory that lasted until curfew, exactly the diversion Harry had intended to deflect more personal questions. When Christmas holidays arrived, Harry returned to Volterra. Felix and Dimitri met him at King's Cross, their imposing presence drawing curious stares from wizard families. The reunion in Volterra was joyful. Harry hadn't realized how much he'd missed the castle and its inhabitants until he was back among them. For 2 weeks, he trained intensively with the guard, practiced advanced magic with Ileana, and updated the Volturi on everything he'd observed at Hogwarts. "The stone situation concerns me," Arrow said during a private meeting in his study. "If Voldemort is involved, directly or through a proxy, this represents his first verified activity since your parents' murder." "You think he's trying to regain physical form," Harry deduced. "The elixir of life would be one method, yes." Arrow paced the ancient stone floor. "We've consulted our sources in the darker magical communities. Rumors have circulated for years about spirits, possessions, and strange happenings in Albanian forests. Nothing confirmed, but consistent with a disembodied entity seeking restoration." Harry absorbed this information. "Should I withdraw from Hogwarts?" Arrow stopped pacing. "Do you want to?" "No," Harry admitted. "Despite the dangers, I'm learning valuable things, about magic, about wizard society, about Dumbledore and his methods." "Then you shall return," Arrow decided. "But with additional precautions." These precautions included advanced protective amulets, emergency portkeys, and intensive training in defensive magic beyond Hogwarts' curriculum. By the time Harry returned to school in January, he was better prepared for potential confrontations. The spring term brought new developments in the stone mystery. Through careful observation and strategic friendships, Harry learned that the stone was protected by a series of obstacles created by different professors. He also confirmed his suspicion that Quirrell was not what he seemed. The stuttering grew more pronounced in public settings but disappeared entirely when the professor thought himself unobserved. Harry's investigation took an unexpected turn in late March when he overheard Quirrell in an empty classroom, apparently arguing with himself, but the second voice was too quiet to make out. Using a vampire-taught stealth technique, Harry positioned himself near the classroom's air vent to listen. "Master, I cannot," Quirrell was saying. "You will obey." The second voice was high, cold, and seemingly emanated from Quirrell himself. "The stone must be secured before Dumbledore suspects. The boy is watching too closely." Harry's blood ran cold. The boy could only be him. He'd been careful, but not careful enough. And the master voice confirmed the possession theory. Voldemort was literally at Hogwarts, attached to Quirrell somehow. Harry retreated silently and immediately contacted Volterra through his mirror. The Volturi Council convened an emergency session, visible in the mirror's expanded view. "This confirms our worst suspicions," Caius said grimly. "The Dark Lord lives, after a fashion." "We should extract Harry immediately," Jane argued, her childlike face fierce with protective fury. "No," Harry countered. "If I disappear now, they'll know I discovered them. We lose the advantage of information." "The boy has a point," Marcus said slowly. "Strategic retreat must be timed properly to avoid revealing intelligence capabilities." After lengthy debate, a plan emerged. Harry would maintain his normal routines but increase security precautions. He would not confront Quirrell/Voldemort directly but would monitor the situation and alert Dumbledore anonymously if the threat to the stone appeared imminent. "Remember your training," Felix advised through the mirror. "Evasion over confrontation. Intelligence gathering over direct action." Harry followed this guidance for the next month, watching Quirrell's deteriorating physical condition, suggesting the possession was taking its toll, and noting increased activity around the third-floor corridor. The situation came to a head in early May. Harry detected unusual magical signatures around the forbidden corridor and observed Quirrell testing the door's defenses after curfew. Using his Ravenclaw prefect connections, he anonymously tipped off Flitwick about suspicious activity without revealing his own involvement. That night, chaos erupted. Dumbledore was called away from the castle on urgent ministry business that screamed setup to Harry's Volturi-trained mind. Quirrell made his move on the stone, but found himself confronted not only by the planned obstacles but also by professors alerted by Flitwick's warning. Harry, hidden under a disillusionment charm, watched from a distance as McGonagall and Snape cornered Quirrell outside the corridor. When they attempted to apprehend him, Quirrell's facade shattered completely. His turban unwound, revealing a horrifying second face on the back of his head, Voldemort's distorted countenance. The ensuing magical battle was brief but violent. Voldemort/Quirrell unleashed dark magic that sent McGonagall crashing into a wall. Snape countered with spells Harry had never seen before, driving the possessed professor back. When Flitwick arrived as reinforcement, Voldemort abandoned strategy for desperation. "The boy," the high voice shrieked from the back of Quirrell's head. "Find Potter. He knows." Harry didn't wait to see more. He retreated strategically to Ravenclaw Tower, activating his emergency communication mirror en route. "Voldemort's been exposed," he reported breathlessly. "Cover blown. Targeting me specifically. Activate your emergency port key," Arrow commanded immediately. "Now, Harry." For the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, Harry hesitated to follow Volturi instructions. "But if I disappear right when this happens, your safety overrides operational secrecy," Marcus cut in firmly. "Activate the port key." Harry reached for the enchanted amulet hidden under his robes, but before he could activate it, a school-wide lockdown engaged, ancient Hogwarts wards snapping into place that prevented all magical transportation. "I can't," he reported. "Hogwarts is sealed. Anti-port key, anti-apparition wards at maximum." Arrow's expression turned grave. "Defensive position then. The secure room we discussed." Harry made his way to a hidden chamber the Volturi had identified through ancient texts, a forgotten storage room with only one entrance, walls of solid stone, and magical shielding that could be activated from inside. He sealed himself in, setting up the defensive measures Ileana had taught him. Through his mirror, the Volturi maintained constant contact, offering strategy and support. "Dumbledore will return soon," Caius predicted. "Voldemort cannot fight the entire Hogwarts staff plus Dumbledore." This proved accurate. Within hours, the castle wards relaxed as Dumbledore returned. Harry's mirror vibrated with an incoming message from Dimitri: "Castle secure. Threat neutralized. Remain in position until personal confirmation." That confirmation came at dawn when Professor Flitwick's Patronus, a raven, found Harry in his hidden room with a message: "All clear, Mr. Potter. Please report to the hospital wing." In the hospital wing, Harry found McGonagall with a bandaged head, Dumbledore looking grave, and several Aurors taking statements. He played his role carefully, concerned student awakened by the commotion, who stayed hidden during the danger as instructed during the lockdown. Dumbledore regarded him with those penetrating blue eyes. "How fortunate you found such a secure hiding place, Harry." "Ravenclaw Common Room has secret study nooks," Harry replied truthfully, if incompletely. "What happened, sir?" The official story emerged: Professor Quirrell had been secretly working against Hogwarts, attempting to steal a protected item. He'd been overcome by dark magic, no mention of Voldemort specifically, and died when Dumbledore intervened. The third-floor corridor was now off-limits for crime scene investigation. "Rest assured, the danger has passed," Dumbledore concluded, though his eyes remained troubled as they studied Harry. Harry maintained his innocent student facade, expressing appropriate levels of shock and relief. When finally released, he contacted Volterra with a full update. "The confrontation ended more conclusively than expected," Arrow observed. "Quirrell dead, the stone presumably secure. But Voldemort himself?" "Fled, according to what I overheard the Auror saying," Harry reported. "They're keeping it quiet to prevent panic, but several witnessed the separate entity leaving Quirrell's body before escape." "So he lives still, in some form," Marcus said heavily. "And now knows you were watching him." This sobering reality shaped the remainder of Harry's first year. Security around him tightened, with Flitwick, coincidentally, finding reasons to check on his Ravenclaws more frequently. Dumbledore observed Harry at mealtimes with thoughtful consideration, though he made no direct approach. The stone incident became distorted through Hogwarts rumor mill. Some versions claimed Harry had been involved in fighting Quirrell, others that Dumbledore had battled dozens of dark wizards. The truth remained known to few. When term ended, Harry returned to Volterra with a mixture of relief and pride. He'd navigated his first year successfully, established his own identity separate from the boy who lived mythology, built strategic relationships, and survived his first direct Voldemort encounter, all while maintaining his Volturi connections. "You've done well," Arrow told him as they celebrated his return with a formal dinner in the Great Hall. "But this is merely the opening gambit. The game grows more complex now that your adversaries know you're on the board." Harry's second year at Hogwarts began with increased security and scrutiny. The Volturi, concerned about Voldemort's awareness of Harry, insisted on additional protective measures. Felix and Dimitri personally escorted him to Platform 9 3/4, conducting subtle magical sweeps for threats before departure. "Remember," Dimitri murmured as Harry prepared to board, "the communication mirrors are upgraded to alert us automatically if your vital signs indicate distress. Don't hesitate to use the emergency protocols." On the train, Harry noted subtle changes in how students regarded him. The previous year's events had transformed him from historical curiosity to contemporary enigma. He'd been present during the Quirrell incident, but his exact role remained unclear, and Harry preferred it that way. Mystery was protection. Ravenclaw had become a comfortable fit for Harry. His housemates respected his intelligence and independence without the hero worship he might have faced in Gryffindor or the political maneuvering of Slytherin. He maintained his cross-house connections, studying occasionally with Hermione, playing chess with Ron, even engaging in politely competitive exchanges with Draco during shared classes. The first hint of that year's trouble came during the welcoming feast when Dumbledore introduced Gilderoy Lockhart as the new defense against the dark arts professor. Harry had read Lockhart's books as part of his preparation and found them riddled with inconsistencies. The man's theatrical entrance and self-aggrandizing speech only confirmed Harry's suspicions. "Complete fraud," he whispered to Padma Patil beside him. "But his books," she began. "Fiction," Harry cut in quietly. "Compare the timeline sometime. He claims to have been curing werewolves in Louisiana the same week he was banishing banshees in Ireland." Word of Harry's assessment spread through Ravenclaw, leading to a house-wide investigation into Lockhart's claims. By October, the Ravenclaws had compiled a devastating dossier of contradictions and impossibilities in the professor's supposed accomplishments. Meanwhile, Harry faced Lockhart's unwanted attention. The professor seemed determined to mentor young Harry in celebrity management, forcing him into publicity photos and offering unsolicited advice on fame. "Patience and documentation," Harry told the Mirror when reporting to Volterra. "No direct confrontation until I have comprehensive evidence." Arrow approved this approach. "Strategic long-term thinking. Very good." The situation changed dramatically on Halloween night when the caretaker's cat was found petrified beside a bloody message, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware." The school erupted in speculation and fear. Harry immediately recognized the serious implications and contacted Volterra for historical context. "The Chamber of Secrets," Marcus explained through the Mirror, his ancient eyes troubled, "was allegedly created by Salazar Slytherin himself, housing some manner of monster that would purge the school of those Slytherin deemed unworthy, primarily Muggleborn students. It was believed to be legend until about 50 years ago," Caius added. "A student died during a series of attacks. The school nearly closed before the culprit was supposedly caught." Harry digested this information. Who was blamed? The vampires exchanged glances. "A student named Rubius Hagrid," Arrow finally answered. "Yes, your Hogwarts groundskeeper. He was expelled," his wand snapped, "but Dumbledore arranged for him to remain at the school as gamekeeper." "Hagrid?" Harry couldn't hide his skepticism. The gentle giant who cried over injured creatures seemed an unlikely murderer. "Indeed. Our sources suggest he was framed by another student, Tom Riddle, who later became Lord Voldemort. This revelation changed Harry's entire approach to the chamber situation. If Voldemort had framed Hagrid and was somehow involved in reopening the chamber, the threat was far greater than students realized. His investigation took multiple tracks. First, he researched Hogwarts histories, looking for references to the chamber's monster. Second, he discreetly questioned Hogwarts ghosts, who often knew castle secrets the living had forgotten. Finally, he observed his fellow students, looking for unusual behaviors or access patterns near attack sites. The attacks continued, a first-year Gryffindor petrified with a camera to his face, a Hufflepuff found frozen near the kitchens. Each incident increased school-wide panic and security measures. During a dueling club demonstration gone wrong, Harry's careful persona management suffered its first serious setback. Lockhart and Snape paired him with Draco Malfoy for a practice duel, and Malfoy conjured a snake that turned aggressive toward nearby students. Harry, reacting instinctively to protect others, spoke to the snake directly, "Leave them alone." The words came out as hisses, Parseltongue, revealing an ability Harry hadn't known he possessed. The room went silent as students stared at him in horror and fascination. "A Parselmouth," someone whispered. "Dark wizard ability." The rumor mill exploded. By dinner, half the school suspected Harry might be Slytherin's heir, opening the chamber himself. His cross-house friendships faced their first serious test as fear overcame reason. That night, Harry contacted Volterra urgently. "I spoke Parseltongue. I didn't know I could." The Volturi Council convened immediately to address this development. "This is significant," Arrow said, "unusually serious. Parseltongue is hereditary, and the Potters have no such history. However, when we removed the soul fragment from your scar, you think it came from Voldemort?" Harry asked, the implications dawning. "That I have his ability because of the connection? It's the most logical explanation," Marcus confirmed. "The fragment may have left traces of Voldemort's magical signature, including this particular talent. How do I handle this at school? Everyone's terrified of me now." Jane's face appeared in the mirror. "Use it strategically. Don't deny the ability, that looks guilty. Acknowledge it, explain that it's rare but not inherently dark, and demonstrate your character through actions rather than words." This advice shaped Harry's response to the Parseltongue revelation. Rather than hiding, he addressed it directly in the Ravenclaw common room, explaining the ability's historical context beyond its dark wizard associations and expressing his own surprise at discovering it. "If I were trying to attack Muggleborns," he pointed out logically to his housemates, "why would I reveal a secret ability in front of the entire school? That would make me suspect number one." The Ravenclaws, appreciating rational argument, largely accepted this explanation. Other houses remained more suspicious, particularly Hufflepuff, which had lost a student to petrification. Harry turned this challenge into opportunity, intensifying his investigation into the chamber. His Parseltongue ability suggested a connection to Slytherin, which might prove useful in understanding the threat. Through methodical research in the restricted section, accessed with permission from Flitwick for historical research, and careful questioning of Moaning Myrtle, the ghost of the student killed 50 years prior, Harry pieced together critical information. The chamber entrance was likely in a girl's bathroom, the monster was probably a basilisk, explaining both petrification and Harry's ability to hear it moving through walls, and water on the floor during attacks suggested pipe travel. Rather than confronting the threat directly, Harry compiled his evidence and presented it anonymously to professors through a carefully crafted letter delivered by School Owl. This strategic approach maintained his cover while ensuring authorities had necessary information. The situation escalated dramatically when a student, Ginny Weasley, was taken into the chamber itself, with a new message: her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. The school faced imminent closure. Staff prepared for evacuation while Aurors were summoned. In the confusion, Harry slipped away to implement his contingency plan, contacting the Volturi for immediate intervention. "This has progressed beyond school security capabilities," he reported through the mirror. Voldemort's involvement seems certain, given the historical pattern. We're sending Dimitri, Arrow decided immediately. His tracking abilities can locate this chamber where conventional methods fail. Stay hidden until his arrival. Within hours, Dimitri arrived at Hogwarts under the guise of a specialist consultant summoned by the Ministry. His vampire senses, combined with Harry's intelligence about the basilisk and chamber location, quickly led them to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The entrance is here, Dimitri confirmed, identifying Parseltongue runes hidden in sink fixtures. But we're not alone in this pursuit. Indeed, they found Professors Dumbledore, McGonagall, and surprisingly, Lockhart, already examining the bathroom. Lockhart appeared to have been forced there against his will, his usual bravado entirely absent. "Mr. Potter," Dumbledore said, unsurprised by Harry's appearance, and Mr. Dimitri Volturi, the vampire introduced himself with formal precision. "Security consultant for Mr. Potter's family. We have information about the chamber and its monster." What followed was a tense collaboration. Harry revealed his research about the basilisk, while Dimitri diplomatically emphasized his specialized tracking skills, without specifying their vampire origin. Dumbledore, recognizing the urgency of saving Ginny Weasley, accepted their assistance without pressing for details. The entrance required Parseltongue, which Harry provided after a moment's hesitation. The sink receded, revealing a dark pipe descending into the depths beneath the castle. "I will go first," Dumbledore stated firmly. "Then Mr. Volturi, as our security specialist. Minerva, please alert the other heads of houses about our location. Gilderoy." His tone changed to one of barely disguised contempt. "You may remain here to guard our exit." Lockhart's relief was palpable as he backed toward the door, only to find himself magically sealed in by McGonagall's silent charm before she departed. The descent into the chamber revealed an ancient, serpent-themed tunnel system. Dimitri moved with preternatural grace, his vampire senses alert for threats. Harry stayed between Dimitri and Dumbledore, maintaining his cover as a concerned but capable student rather than the investigation's architect. They found Ginny unconscious near a massive statue of Salazar Slytherin, a black diary beside her and a semi-transparent figure standing nearby, a teenage boy in Hogwarts robes from another era. "Tom Riddle," Dumbledore said quietly. "Or should I say, a memory of him." The phantom teenager smiled coldly. "Professor Dumbledore. How convenient. Now you can witness my return firsthand." Harry studied the scene with Volturi-trained analysis. The diary, the fading girl, the strengthening apparition, the pattern was clear. "He's draining her life force," Harry said quietly. "The diary is the conduit." Riddle's eyes snapped to Harry with sudden interest. "Harry Potter. So the rumors are true, you survived my older self's attack. How fascinating." His gaze shifted to Dimitri. "And you've brought interesting company." Dimitri positioned himself slightly in front of Harry, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by either Dumbledore or Riddle. "Release Miss Weasley, Tom," Dumbledore commanded, his wand now drawn. "I think not," Riddle replied. "Her life force is nearly mine. And then I shall command Slytherin's basilisk to finish what my older self could not." He turned toward the statue, hissing in Parseltongue, "Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four." The statue's mouth began to open. Dumbledore immediately conjured a rooster, the basilisk's natural enemy, while casting a spell to cover their eyes with protective filters that would prevent direct fatal gaze. Dimitri moved with vampire speed, snatching the diary from beside Ginny and tossing it to Harry. "Destroy it," he ordered, before positioning himself to intercept the emerging basilisk. Harry didn't hesitate. Drawing on his wandless magic training, he focused raw destructive intent through his wand at the diary. Incendio Maxima. The spell erupted with unusual force, engulfing the diary in magical flames far more intense than the standard charm should produce. Riddle screamed as the diary began to burn, his spectral form distorting. The basilisk, half emerged from the statue, thrashed in confusion as its master's control wavered. Dumbledore, seemingly unsurprised by Harry's magical display, used the distraction to target the basilisk directly. A complex spell shot from his wand, striking the creature's eyes and blinding it. What followed was coordinated chaos. Dimitri, moving faster than human eyes could track, harried the blinded basilisk while avoiding its venomous fangs. Dumbledore cast spell after spell to contain and weaken the creature. Harry maintained his focus on destroying the diary completely, pouring more power into the flames until the book blackened and began to leak a dark, ink-like substance. With a final, terrible cry, Riddle's phantom form exploded into wisps of darkness that dissipated through the chamber. The basilisk, freed from control but still dangerous, lunged blindly toward the sound of Harry's continued spellcasting. Dimitri intercepted it with inhuman strength, gripping its massive head and wrenching it away from Harry's position. The move was so obviously beyond human capability that it momentarily froze everyone, including Dumbledore. The headmaster recovered quickly, seizing the opening to cast a final, devastating spell that struck the basilisk with the power of a thunderbolt, finally killing the ancient creature. Silence fell in the chamber as Ginny began to stir, color returning to her face as the diary's drain ceased. Dumbledore turned slowly toward Dimitri, whose red eyes were now clearly visible, the concealing contacts having dissolved during the intense battle. "Mr. Volturi," he said carefully, "it seems Harry's guardians have been even more unusual than I suspected." "This discussion should wait for a more appropriate time," Dimitri replied smoothly, gesturing to the recovering girl. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. The child needs medical attention." Dumbledore nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Indeed. Though I suspect we have much to discuss very soon." The return to the school brought another crisis, explaining what had happened without revealing vampire involvement. Dumbledore, surprisingly, assisted with this, creating a narrative that emphasized Harry's research contribution and his own confrontation with the monster, while describing Dimitri simply as a ministry consultant with specialized training. Ginny Weasley, traumatized but alive, remembered little beyond writing in the diary throughout the year and experiencing blackouts. The diary itself, now a charred husk, was taken by Dumbledore for further investigation. In the aftermath, Harry faced a serious debriefing with the Volturi Council through his communication mirror. "Dumbledore knows," he reported grimly. "Dimitri had no choice, the basilisk was coming straight for me." "The revelation was inevitable eventually," Arrow said philosophically. "Better in a context where a Volturi saved a student than in some manufactured confrontation." "What's our approach now?" Harry asked. "Transparency with limits," Marcus advised. "Acknowledge your vampire guardianship but emphasize the educational and protective aspects. The wizard world already views you as exceptional, this merely adds another layer to your mystique." The predicted confrontation with Dumbledore came the following day. Harry was summoned to the headmaster's office, where he found not only Dumbledore but also Professors McGonagall, Snape, and Flitwick. "Harry," Dumbledore began gently, "I think it's time you shared the full story of your guardianship situation. Mr. Volturi's abilities during yesterday's event suggest a reality rather different from what you've previously indicated." Harry had prepared for this moment with Volturi guidance. "My guardians are the Volturi Coven of Volterra," he stated calmly. "They found me when I was 5, living in a cupboard at the Dursleys. They recognized magical tampering with my person and removed me to safety." The professors exchanged glances at this direct confirmation. "Vampires," Snape said flatly. "You were raised by vampires." "Yes, Professor. The Volturi are not just any vampire coven," Flitwick said, his usual cheerfulness absent. "They're the ruling body of the vampire world." Harry nodded. "They've been excellent guardians. They value knowledge, strategic thinking, and self-determination, qualities that transferred well to Ravenclaw. They also feed on humans," McGonagall pointed out, her Scottish brogue more pronounced with stress. "They've never fed on me or in my presence," Harry countered calmly. They respected my humanity while teaching me to understand their nature. Dumbledore leaned forward. Harry, while I understand they may have treated you well, there are serious concerns about a wizarding child being raised in such an environment. There are laws, which the Ministry has no jurisdiction to enforce against the Volturi, Harry interrupted politely but firmly. As Professor Flitwick noted, they are sovereign rulers of their own society, recognized by the International Confederation of Wizards as a separate magical power. The professors looked to Dumbledore, who sighed. Technically correct, though rarely tested in this specific context. My guardianship arrangement has produced positive results, Harry continued, using the logical approach that appealed to Ravenclaw sensibilities. I'm academically successful, socially adjusted, and twice now have helped address serious threats to Hogwarts. I would suggest that the results speak for themselves. The meeting continued for another hour, with Harry calmly addressing concerns, explaining aspects of his vampire education, carefully edited for security, and maintaining his position that the arrangement should continue. Dumbledore, while clearly troubled, recognized the political and legal complexities. We will need to establish more formal communication with your guardians, he finally conceded. And perhaps certain accommodations for their nature, during school events like parent conferences. They would welcome such arrangements, Harry agreed, knowing the Volturi would see this as an opportunity rather than a concession. The remainder of the school year brought significant changes to Harry's Hogwarts experience. His vampire connection became public knowledge, transforming him from the boy who lived to the vampire prince in student gossip. Some feared him, others were morbidly fascinated, but few approached him with the casual ease of before. His core relationships remained stable, however. The Ravenclaw analytical mindset helped his housemates adapt to the revelation. Hermione Granger bombarded him with questions about vampire society from an academic perspective. Ron Weasley, grateful for Harry's role in saving his sister, declared that, vampire family or not, you're all right by me. Even Draco Malfoy, after initial shock, found the connection politically intriguing. Father says the Volturi are extraordinarily powerful in certain circles, he commented during potions. Their alliance isn't something to dismiss lightly. As the term ended, the chamber incident faded from immediate concern, though its implications lingered. Dumbledore had recognized the diary as something significant. His expression when examining the destroyed remains had revealed deep worry beneath his usual composure. On the Hogwarts Express returning to London, Harry shared a compartment with friends from different houses, a deliberate statement about maintaining connections despite the revelations about his guardianship. Will you come to the Quidditch World Cup next summer? Ron asked hopefully. Dad might be able to get tickets through the Ministry. I'd like to, Harry said honestly, though my summer plans are usually quite structured. Vampire training? Ginny asked with a mixture of fear and fascination. She'd been quiet around Harry since the chamber incident, but was slowly recovering her confidence. Harry smiled. Some of that. Also normal subjects like languages, history, mathematics. The Volturi value comprehensive education. Languages? Hermione perked up. Which ones do you speak? Italian fluently, decent French, some Latin, and a bit of Romanian. Jane, one of my guardians, is teaching me Russian this summer. The casual references to his vampire family gradually normalized the concept among his friends. By the time they reached King's Cross, the initial shock had mellowed to curious acceptance. Felix and Dimitri awaited Harry on the platform, drawing stares with their imposing presence and subtle vampire aura that made nearby humans instinctively uneasy. They were joined by a third figure, Jane herself, her childlike appearance belying her ancient status. Harry, she greeted him with a rare public smile. We've missed you. Several students watching the exchange seemed stunned to see the feared vampire guardians showing such obvious affection. Harry embraced them without hesitation, further confounding expectations. Your safety this year was unacceptable, Jane informed him as they collected his trunk. Arrow has decided I will accompany you next term as an exchange student observer. Dumbledore has already approved the arrangement. Harry's eyes widened. A Volturi guard attending Hogwarts would change everything. That will be interesting. Indeed, Dimitri said with a slight smile. But first, you have a summer of training ahead. After 2 near-death experiences in 2 years, your combat capabilities need significant enhancement. As they left the platform, Harry caught Dumbledore watching from a distance, his expression thoughtful. The headmaster nodded once in acknowledgement before disappearing into the crowd. The chess pieces were moving, the game growing more complex. But Harry was no longer a pawn, he was a player in his own right, with the Volturi's ancient wisdom supporting his increasingly independent moves. Harry's 13th summer marked a turning point in his training. The Volturi, alarmed by the consecutive Hogwarts threats, intensified his preparation for potential confrontation. Felix focused on physical combat against magical opponents. Wizards rely on wands and distance, he explained during a grueling training session in the castle's underground arena. Take away either, and most are helpless. Harry practiced disarming techniques, close-quarter moves designed to neutralize a wand wielder's advantage, and environmental awareness to use surroundings strategically. His magical training evolved similarly. Ileana returned to Volterra for an extended visit, bringing advanced defensive texts and dueling techniques not taught at Hogwarts until Newt levels. Your wandless foundation gives you an advantage, she noted as Harry practiced shielding against multiple simultaneous attacks. Most wizards freeze if disarmed. You simply shift approaches. The most significant development, however, came from Arrow himself. After extensive research into Harry's Parseltongue ability and its probable origin in Voldemort's soul fragment, Arrow proposed a controversial theory. The diary that possessed young Ginny Weasley, he said during a private meeting in his study, was more than a simple enchanted object. Based on the description of its behavior and effects, I believe it was a Horcrux. Harry frowned. I'm not familiar with that term. Few are. It's among the darkest arts, a container for a soul fragment, created through murder to anchor one to the mortal realm even if the body is destroyed. Arrow's ancient eyes were grave. The fragment we removed from your scar had similar magical signatures. The implication stunned Harry. You're saying Voldemort split his soul multiple times? Deliberately. It would explain his survival after the killing curse rebounded. And if he made one Horcrux, he likely made others. Arrow paced the stone floor. Dumbledore must suspect this as well, given his reaction to the diary. This revelation shaped Harry's third-year preparation. Beyond physical and magical training, he now studied obscure texts on soul magic and immortality methods from the Volturi's extensive occult library. Meanwhile, Jane prepared for her role as exchange student observer at Hogwarts, a cover that would allow her to protect Harry while gathering intelligence on Dumbledore's operations. She practiced moderating her vampire traits and studied modern teenage behavior to blend in more effectively. Remember, you're supposed to be 16, Alec teased his perpetually childlike twin. Try not to talk about historical events you witnessed firsthand. Jane's response was a flash of her pain gift that left Alec momentarily gasping, followed by the siblings' version of laughter. The carefully structured summer was interrupted by unexpected news from Britain. Sirius Black, infamous mass murderer and alleged Voldemort supporter, had escaped from Azkaban prison. Curious timing, Marcus observed when the Daily Prophet report reached Volterra. The first ever escape from Azkaban, occurring just as Voldemort's diary Horcrux is destroyed. Harry remembered the Volturi's intelligence on his parents' deaths. Black was supposedly their secret keeper, right? The one who betrayed their location to Voldemort. According to official records, Dimitri confirmed. Though our investigation always found inconsistencies in that narrative. Black had no known Death Eater connections before that night, no dark mark when captured. And he was never given a proper trial, just shipped directly to Azkaban in the post-war chaos. The ministry's claiming he's coming after me, Harry noted, scanning the newspaper. Minister Fudge visited him at Azkaban and reported Black muttering, he's at Hogwarts in his sleep. Arrow tapped his papery fingers together thoughtfully. This bears closer examination. Jane's presence at Hogwarts becomes even more valuable now. The final weeks before term included briefings on Black's case, reviews of Harry's parents' history, and analysis of Azkaban's Dementor guards, creatures that even vampires regarded with caution. Dementors feed on positive emotions, Caius explained. They cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with. Even we find their presence distasteful. They affect vampires too? Harry asked, surprised. Differently than humans, Marcus clarified. We experience a dulling of senses rather than emotional drainage. But their presence is universally unwelcome. When September 1st arrived, Harry traveled to King's Cross with an unprecedented escort, Felix, Dimitri, Jane, and 2 lower-ranking Volturi guards disguised as private security. The platform parted before them, wizard families staring openly at the vampire entourage. Ministry officials waited by the train, including the Minister of Magic himself. Cornelius Fudge, a portly man in a pinstriped suit and lime-green bowler, approached with obvious nervousness. Mr. Potter, he greeted Harry with forced joviality. Wanted to ensure your safe boarding personally. With Black on the loose, we can't be too careful. Minister Fudge, Harry acknowledged politely. May I introduce Jane Volturi, who will be attending Hogwarts this term as an exchange observer? Fudge blanched slightly as Jane stepped forward, her red eyes barely concealed by specialty contacts. Ah, yes, Dumbledore mentioned, unusual arrangements. The Ministry has, approved the exception to standard enrollment policies. How gracious, Jane said with a cold smile that made Fudge step back involuntarily. I look forward to experiencing Britain's premier magical institution. The political tension was palpable as Fudge made hasty excuses to depart. Once aboard the train, Harry and Jane found a compartment where they were soon joined by Hermione and Ron. Blimey, Ron whispered, staring at Jane. You're really a vampire? Yes. Jane's voice was matter-of-fact. Over 1,000 years old, though physically frozen at 13. Hermione's academic curiosity overcame any fear. That's fascinating. The books on vampire development suggest, most wizard books on vampires are deeply flawed, Jane interrupted. Written by observers with limited access and considerable bias. The awkward introduction was interrupted when the train suddenly lurched to a stop. Frost formed on the windows as an unnatural cold permeated the compartment. Dementors, Harry realized, remembering the Volturi briefing. They're searching the train for Black. The compartment door slid open, revealing a tall, hooded figure. Its rattling breath seemed to suck all warmth and light from the air. Harry felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of despair as memories surfaced, Dursley's cruel hands locking him in the cupboard, hungry nights, fearful darkness. But something else emerged too, a high, cold laugh and a flash of green light. A woman screaming. His mother. Jane moved with vampire speed, placing herself between Harry and the Dementor. Leave, she commanded, her eyes narrowing with focus. Now. The Dementor hesitated, seemingly confused by Jane's nature. Then it convulsed as Jane unleashed her pain gift, the ability to create the illusion of excruciating agony in her targets. With a terrible shriek, the Dementor retreated. Jane slammed the compartment door shut, turning to the shaken students. Chocolate, she ordered briskly. It counteracts Dementor exposure. Harry, fighting off the lingering chill, broke his emergency chocolate supply into pieces for everyone. Thanks, he told Jane quietly. That was unpleasant, she finished. Even for me. Those creatures are abominations. The incident set the tone for Harry's 3rd year. Dementors stationed around Hogwarts created a perpetual sense of gloom, affecting student morale and Harry's own well-being. The creatures seemed unusually drawn to him, perhaps sensing the remnants of his connection to Voldemort. Jane's integration into Hogwarts proved surprisingly smooth in some ways, problematic in others. Dumbledore had arranged for her to join sixth-year Ravenclaw classes, providing a private room modified for vampire needs. Professors were briefed on her nature and status as an observer rather than a traditional student. Student reactions varied dramatically. Some were terrified, others fascinated. Within weeks, Jane had acquired a small following of admirers captivated by her ethereal beauty and ancient knowledge, alongside a larger group who gave her a wide berth in hallways. "This is why we maintain separation from humans," she complained to Harry after a particularly persistent Hufflepuff attempted to ask her to Hogsmeade. "They either fear us excessively or not enough." Harry's own status shifted with Jane's presence. Having a known Volturi guard as his sister figure, reinforced his connection to vampire royalty, creating a strange dynamic where he was simultaneously more intimidating to fellow students yet also more humanized by comparison. Academically, Harry's third year brought new challenges and opportunities. He selected ancient runes and arithmancy as electives, subjects the Volturi had already introduced him to, but which offered formal certification useful for future magical careers. His most interesting class proved to be Defense Against the Dark Arts, now taught by Professor Remus Lupin, a shabby, prematurely aged wizard who nonetheless demonstrated more practical knowledge than his predecessors combined. During their first lesson on boggarts, creatures that transformed into one's worst fear, Harry experienced a moment of genuine uncertainty. What would his boggart become? The Dursleys? Voldemort? Dumbledore's manipulations? When his turn came, the boggart shifted, but not into any of these. Instead, it became Harry himself, eyes blood red, fangs extended, standing over the broken bodies of his friends. Vampire Harry. The class fell silent as Harry froze, momentarily stunned by this manifestation of his subconscious fear, becoming the predator rather than the protected. "Ridiculous," he said firmly, visualizing the vampire version of himself slipping on blood and falling comically. The spell worked, transforming the scene to laughter, but the image lingered in everyone's minds. Lupin watched Harry with unusual intensity after that class. Eventually, he requested a private meeting, revealing himself as one of James Potter's closest friends. "I knew your parents well," Lupin explained in his office. "Your father, James, was one of my dearest friends at Hogwarts. We were inseparable, James, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and myself." Harry, who had researched these connections through Volturi intelligence, nodded. "You were called the Marauders, I believe." Lupin looked surprised. "Yes, though I wonder how you know that term." "My guardians believe in thorough historical research," Harry said simply. "Including my parents' lives and connections." A shadow crossed Lupin's face. "Your guardians. The Volturi." He seemed to struggle with his next words. "Harry, while I understand they've cared for you, I feel obligated as your parents' friend to express concern about vampire influence during your formative years." "Professor," Harry replied calmly, "I appreciate your concern as genuine, given your connection to my parents. But I've had 8 years with the Volturi, years of education, protection, and yes, genuine care. They're my family now, whatever their nature." Lupin studied him sadly. "You have James's look but Lily's way of seeing the world, finding the good in unexpected places." He sighed. "I just wish they could have raised you themselves." "So do I," Harry admitted. "But since that wasn't possible, I'm grateful for the family I found." Their conversation shifted to Sirius Black, with Lupin clearly uncomfortable discussing his former friend. "The evidence against him was overwhelming," he said, though Harry noted hesitation in his voice. "Was there a trial transcript?" Harry asked innocently. "I've been unable to locate one in my research." Lupin frowned. "Now that you mention it, those were chaotic times. Many procedures were expedited." This conversation cemented Harry's growing suspicion that Black's case warranted deeper investigation. The Volturi had already flagged inconsistencies, and Lupin's uncertainty added another layer of doubt. Harry's investigation took a dramatic turn during the first Hogsmeade weekend. While other students visited the Wizarding Village, Harry, who had permission through the Volturi rather than the Dursleys, and Jane conducted a systematic exploration of the castle's less traveled areas, mapping secret passages and potential escape routes, standard Volturi security protocol. Their exploration led them to discover the truth about Lupin's monthly illnesses. He was a werewolf, secluding himself during full moons. This explained his reaction to Harry's vampire guardianship, given the historical animosity between vampires and werewolves. More significantly, they encountered a large black dog that Jane immediately identified as an animagus, a wizard capable of animal transformation. Not a normal transformation signature, she whispered as they watched the dog from a distance. The magical aura is distorted, likely from long-term form maintenance. The dog seemed to be watching the castle, particularly Gryffindor Tower. After observing its patterns for several weekends, Harry came to a startling conclusion: this was Sirius Black himself, somehow entering Hogwarts grounds undetected. Rather than reporting this immediately, Harry consulted with the full Volturi Council through his mirror. If Black wanted to harm me, he's had multiple opportunities, he pointed out. This behavior suggests surveillance rather than attack preparation. Or he's waiting for the perfect moment, Caius countered. The timing remains suspicious, Marcus noted. Why escape now, after 12 years? Arrow made the decisive call: Harry and Jane will attempt controlled contact. Not capture, not confrontation, just information gathering. If Black is innocent, as certain evidence suggests, he may provide valuable intelligence about Voldemort's first rise and fall. Implementing this plan proved challenging. Black's movements were erratic, and the constant Dementor presence complicated tracking. Eventually, Harry and Jane set a trap, leaving clear evidence of Harry's regular visits to the lake shore, creating a predictable pattern that might draw Black for observation. The strategy worked. On a crisp November evening, the black dog appeared at the lake edge where Harry sat apparently alone, though Jane lurked nearby under disillusionment. Harry spoke without turning. You can approach in human form if you prefer, Mr. Black. We're alone, and I'm not afraid of you. The dog froze, then slowly transformed into a gaunt, haggard man with matted hair and haunted eyes. How did you know? His voice was raspy from disuse. Logical deduction, Harry replied, finally turning to face his parents' alleged betrayer. The question is why you're here, watching me, rather than attempting harm as everyone expects. Black's laugh was hollow. Harm you? I came to protect you, Harry. From the real traitor, Peter Pettigrew. Who's supposedly dead at your hand, Harry noted calmly. Along with 12 muggles. I didn't kill any of them. Black's vehemence was startling. Pettigrew blew up the street, cut off his finger, and escaped as a rat, his animagus form. He's the one who betrayed your parents to Voldemort, not me. Jane appeared silently beside Harry, making Black jump back in alarm. Vampire, he whispered, recognizing her nature instantly. Yes, Jane said simply. Harry's guardian and protector. You have one opportunity to provide evidence for your claims before I consider you a threat to be eliminated. Black's eyes darted between them. You, live with vampires? James and Lily's son. Focus, Mr. Black, Harry redirected. Evidence about Pettigrew. Something in Harry's composed manner seemed to center Black. Pettigrew is here, at Hogwarts. Living as a pet rat. Ron Weasley's rat, Scabbers. This claim aligned with certain observations Harry had made: the rat's unusually long lifespan, its apparent intelligence, and its growing agitation this year. The Volturi intelligence on the Marauders had indicated they were unregistered animagi, with Pettigrew's form being a rat. If we capture this rat and prove it's Pettigrew, Harry proposed carefully, what then? Justice, Black said simply. Clearing my name. And. He hesitated. Getting to know you, if you'd allow it. I'm your godfather, Harry. I should have been raising you all these years. The pain in his voice was genuine, and Jane nodded slightly to Harry, vampire senses could detect physiological signs of truthfulness that humans might miss. "We'll investigate your claim," Harry decided. "But you need to remain hidden. If the Dementors find you—" "I'm well aware," Black shuddered. "They've been my only company for 12 years. This meeting began an elaborate operation coordinated between Harry, Jane, and the Volturi Council through their communication mirrors. The first challenge was capturing Scabbers without arousing suspicion. The rat had become increasingly nervous, often disappearing for days at a time, making Ron worried and irritable. Harry and Hermione, who had been selectively briefed on the situation after swearing magical confidentiality, created a specialized cage with Jane's help, one that would prevent Animagus transformation once sealed. The capture opportunity came in early December when Ron mentioned Scabbers hiding in his trunk. With careful planning, Harry accidentally damaged the trunk during a friendly roughhousing session in the Gryffindor common room, necessitating its repair away from the dormitory, with Scabbers inside. Once isolated in an unused classroom, Jane moved with vampire speed to secure the panicking rat in the special cage. Hermione performed the Animagus revealing charm they'd researched, confirming the rat was indeed a disguised human before it could attempt transformation. The next phase required delicate handling. Rather than involving Hogwarts staff, who might alert the Ministry prematurely, Harry contacted Dimitri through the mirror. The tracker arrived under cover of night, using vampire abilities to bypass Hogwarts security. In a secure location within the Shrieking Shack, ironically, the same building used for Lupin's werewolf transformations, they confronted Pettigrew directly. Forced back into human form by Demetri's spell, the balding, rat-like man cowered before them. "Please," he whimpered. "You don't understand. The Dark Lord, his powers, you can't imagine, what would you have done?" "Not betrayed my friends," Harry said coldly. "Not framed an innocent man. Not hidden as a pet for 12 years. Jane's eyes narrowed. "He lies even now. I can smell his fear." Sirius Black, summoned to witness this confrontation, lunged toward Pettigrew with murderous intent, only to be restrained by Demetri's superhuman strength. "Death is too simple," Dimitri advised. "Justice requires process." The Volturi approach prevailed, strategic rather than emotional. They documented everything, extracting memories from Pettigrew using modified legilimency techniques that even the self-trained Eklumans couldn't resist. These memories revealed the complete truth: Pettigrew as secret keeper, the betrayal, the staged explosion, and years of hiding while an innocent man suffered in Azkaban. Rather than immediately turning Pettigrew over to authorities, the Volturi insisted on controlling the revelation for maximum impact and Harry's best advantage. Arrow, communicating through the mirror, directed a sophisticated approach. "The Ministry will resist admitting their error," he noted. "Fudge particularly fears political embarrassment. We must create a situation where denial is impossible." The plan they developed was audacious. During the final pre-Christmas Hogsmeade weekend, when most staff and students would be away from the castle, Dimitri transported the restrained Pettigrew directly to the Great Hall during dinner. Present were Dumbledore, several staff members, and a handful of students including Harry and Jane. "Peter Pettigrew," Dimitri announced formally, depositing the bound man on the floor before the head table, Order of Merlin recipient, supposedly murdered by Sirius Black, found living disguised as a student's pet. The stunned silence shattered when Lupin stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. "Peter?" His voice mixed disbelief, horror, and growing rage. "It can't be." "But it is," Harry confirmed, stepping forward with documentation prepared by the Volturi legal team, testimonies, memory vials, and historical evidence of the secret keeper switch. "Sirius Black was never my parents' secret keeper. He never received a trial. And this man has hidden at Hogwarts for years while an innocent man suffered in Azkaban." Dumbledore, for once, appeared genuinely surprised. His blue eyes moved from Pettigrew to Harry to Dimitri, calculating rapidly. "These are extraordinary claims requiring immediate verification. Precisely why I've already contacted the Department of Magical Law Enforcement directly," Jane added smoothly. Madam Bones should be arriving momentarily with Aurors and Veritaserum to conduct a proper investigation, something denied to Sirius Black 12 years ago. The ensuing investigation created the term's biggest scandal. Amelia Bones, head of magical law enforcement, conducted thorough questioning under Veritaserum that confirmed everything: Black's innocence, Pettigrew's guilt, and the Ministry's rush to judgment that imprisoned an innocent man for over a decade. The Daily Prophet's front page captured the moment perfectly: Pettigrew alive, Black innocent, Ministry scandal exposed by Boy Who lived and vampire allies. For Harry, the most significant outcome was the legal recognition of Sirius Black as his godfather. While the Volturi maintained primary guardianship, Sirius gained visitation rights and a formal role in Harry's wizarding education. "I won't pretend I'm comfortable with vampire guardians," Sirius admitted during their first legal meeting at a ministry office. "But I can see they've raised you well. Better than I could have from a cell in Azkaban. They saved me from the Dursleys," Harry explained. "And gave me a home when the wizarding world had abandoned me to cupboard under the stairs." The pain in Sirius's eyes was raw. "I failed you that night, chasing after Pettigrew instead of taking care of you. I won't make that mistake again." The arrangement that emerged was unprecedented: shared guardianship between the Volturi and a newly exonerated wizard. Sirius would visit Volterra during holidays, while maintaining a wizarding home where Harry could connect with his magical heritage during breaks from school. The winter term ended with Harry returning to Volterra accompanied by both Jane and Sirius, a strange grouping that symbolized his unique position bridging vampire and wizard worlds. The Dementors were removed from Hogwarts, Lupin continued teaching despite his werewolf status being accidentally exposed, and the wizarding world adjusted to the revelation that their heroic orphan had been raised by vampire royalty. As Harry settled back into the familiar rhythms of Volterra, Arrow called a private meeting in his study. Present were Marcus, Caius, Jane, and surprisingly, Sirius Black, still uncomfortable in vampire company but determined to fulfill his godfather duties. "The events of this year have clarified certain patterns," Arrow began, pacing before the ancient fireplace. "Voldemort's diary Horcrux, Pettigrew's emergence from hiding, the manipulation of wizard justice systems. These are not isolated incidents but connected movements in a larger game." "You believe Voldemort is preparing to return," Harry stated rather than asked. "The evidence suggests it," Marcus confirmed. "Horcruxes ensure he cannot truly die until they are destroyed. The diary was one, but likely not the only one. And your scar contained another fragment," Caius added. "Though unintentional, based on our research." Sirius looked alarmed. Harry's scar had a piece of Voldemort in it. "It was removed years ago," Harry assured him. "The Volturi detected and eliminated it when I was 5. Arrow resumed his explanation. "With the diary destroyed and Pettigrew captured before he could rejoin his master, Voldemort's restoration plans have been disrupted. But not permanently. He will find other servants, other methods. Then we find his remaining Horcruxes," Harry concluded logically. "Before he can return to power." "Precisely," Arrow smiled approvingly. "And with our combined resources, Volturi intelligence networks and Black family knowledge of dark wizarding circles, we may accomplish what neither the Ministry nor Dumbledore has managed." Sirius, despite his reservations about vampires, found himself aligned with their strategic thinking. James and Lily died opposing Voldemort. "If there's a chance to prevent his return and protect Harry, I'm in, uncomfortable alliances and all." The meeting established a new phase in Harry's education, preparation not just for school challenges but for the coming wizard war that seemed increasingly inevitable. The Volturi's centuries of experience with magical conflicts would combine with Sirius's insider knowledge of British wizarding society to position Harry not as a victim or pawn, but as a prepared combatant. As spring arrived, Harry reflected on how far he'd come from the frightened child in a cupboard. 3 years at Hogwarts had brought challenges, but also confirmation that his vampire upbringing had prepared him well for navigating both worlds. "The key," Arrow had told him before his first Hogwarts departure, "is to recognize that you belong to neither world exclusively, but can move between them by understanding both. Now, with vampire family, wizard godfather, and growing personal agency, Harry was positioned uniquely in the coming conflict, not as Dumbledore's sacrificial weapon or Voldemort's destined enemy, but as his own force, shaped by the best of both worlds he inhabited. Chapter 3, Blood Ties. The Italian summer sun beat down on the training grounds behind Volterra Castle as Harry dodged a series of spells from multiple directions. At 14, he'd grown several inches over the past year, his movements more fluid and confident than ever before. Faster! Jane called from the sidelines. A Death Eater won't telegraph their attacks. Harry spun, wandlessly deflecting a stunner before dropping to one knee and sending 3 rapid-fire hexes toward his attackers, Dimitri, Felix, and surprisingly, Sirius Black. Sirius yelped as one hex slipped past his shield charm. Bloody hell, Harry! That stings! Felix laughed, a booming sound that echoed across the courtyard. The wizard is soft, little prince. Perhaps we should increase the intensity. No increasing anything, Sirius protested, rubbing his arm. I'm still human, unlike you lot. The past month had been a strange adjustment period, Sirius integrating into Harry's summer routine at Volterra while the vampires adapted to having a wizard permanently in their midst. Despite initial tensions, a cautious respect had developed between Harry's godfather and his vampire family. That's enough for today, Arrow called, gliding into the courtyard with Marcus and Caius. Harry has correspondence to address before tonight's strategy session. Harry nodded, catching the water bottle Jane tossed him. Minister Fudge again? Among others. Arrow's smile didn't reach his eyes. The political fallout from your third year continues to ripple outward. That was putting it mildly. The exposure of Pettigrew, exoneration of Sirius, and very public involvement of the Volturi had created a political firestorm in Wizarding Britain. The ministry, embarrassed by their 12-year mistake, had pivoted from celebrating Harry as their savior to questioning the foreign influence of his vampire guardians. Back in his suite, Harry found a stack of official-looking envelopes on his desk. The top one bore the elaborate seal of the Ministry of Magic. They're demanding a formal custody hearing, he read aloud to Sirius, who lounged in a nearby chair. Claiming grave concerns about the welfare of the boy who lived under non-human guardianship. Sirius snorted. Rich coming from the same ministry that threw me in Azkaban without trial and left you with those muggle monsters. What does Arrow think? He expected this. Harry set aside the letter. They can demand all they want, international magical law is clear on vampire sovereignty. The Volturi predate the ministry by over 1,000 years. Politics isn't about law, kiddo. It's about perception. Sirius stretched. And right now, Fudge is desperate to shift attention from his administration's failures to the vampire threat supposedly corrupting their savior. Harry moved to the next letter, this one from Dumbledore, requesting a meeting before term began. The headmaster's playing his own angle. He wants to discuss arrangements for the upcoming special event at Hogwarts and my continued safety given recent developments. The Triwizard Tournament, Sirius confirmed. It's supposed to be secret, but the old pureblood families have been gossiping for months. First one in centuries. And conveniently timed to distract from the ministry's Sirius Black debacle, Harry noted. Jane already briefed me. 3 schools, dangerous tasks, eternal glory, all the usual wizard nonsense about proving yourself through needless risk. Sirius laughed. You sound more vampire than wizard sometimes. I'm both, Harry replied simply. And neither. The third letter came from an unexpected source, Lucius Malfoy. Harry broke the ornate wax seal, scanning the elegant script with raised eyebrows. Now this is interesting. The Malfoys are inviting me to the Quidditch World Cup, Minister's Box, VIP treatment, the works. He looked up at Sirius. Draco never mentioned this. Of course not, Sirius scowled. Lucius is testing waters, trying to establish connection now that your Volturi ties are public. The Death Eaters who avoided Azkaban are recalculating your value in their political equations. A slow smile spread across Harry's face. Perfect. Perfect. Sirius looked alarmed. Harry, the Malfoys were deep in Voldemort's inner circle. This is a trap. Or an opportunity. Harry tapped the invitation thoughtfully. 3 factions are positioning around me, Ministry, Dumbledore, and now the old Death Eater families. Each thinks they understand what I am and how to use me. And none of them have a clue, Sirius realized, his expression shifting from concern to reluctant admiration. Merlin, you really were raised by the most political vampires in history. Harry grinned. I had good teachers in both worlds. Now I get to apply those lessons. That evening's strategy session brought together the Volturi leadership, Sirius, and 2 human contacts, intelligence specialists the vampires had cultivated within European magical governments. As Harry entered Arrow's private council chamber, he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This was no longer about school challenges or personal safety, but the opening moves in a complex game with global implications. The World Cup invitation presents a unique opportunity, Arrow began once everyone was seated. A public reintegration of Harry into Wizarding Britain's social circles, on terms we control. It's also a perfect target for any remaining Death Eater elements, Caius countered. Hundreds of thousands of wizards gathered in one location, minimal security capabilities. Sirius nodded. The Ministry's focusing everything on the glamour and international relations. Actual security planning is an afterthought. Which makes it a potential flashpoint, Marcus observed quietly. The first public gathering of magical Britain since signs of Voldemort's potential return began emerging. Harry listened as they debated various scenarios, only speaking when directly addressed. The Volturi had taught him to observe first, weighing all perspectives before offering his own. When the discussion turned to specific security arrangements, however, he straightened. I should accept the Malfoy invitation, he said firmly. All eyes turned to him. With conditions, he continued. I'll attend with both Volturi and Black Protection, a visible statement that I move between worlds on my own terms. We'll use the event to assess which Death Eater families are merely politically aligned with Malfoy versus actively preparing for Voldemort's return. Dangerous, Felix rumbled from his position by the wall. Calculated, Harry countered. We need information about Voldemort's support network. And I need to establish my position in Wizarding Society before returning to Hogwarts for the tournament. Arrow's papery hands came together in quiet applause. Precisely the approach I would suggest. You've learned well, young one. The plan took shape over the following days. Harry would accept the Malfoy invitation with specified conditions. Jane and Alec would accompany him as his adopted siblings, with Felix and Dimitri as formal guards. Sirius would join as his wizarding guardian, a pointed reminder of the Ministry's past failures. The response came swiftly, Lucius Malfoy agreeing to all conditions with barely concealed surprise at Harry's boldness. The political calculation was clear, whatever discomfort hosting vampires might cause was outweighed by the value of public association with both the boy who lived and the Volturi. The night before their departure for Britain, Harry found Jane on the castle's highest tower, gazing at the stars over Volterra. Nervous about tomorrow, he asked, joining her at the stone parapet. She gave him a look that would have terrified most humans. I don't get nervous. Right. Harry grinned. Just like you weren't nervous before attending Hogwarts last year. That was different. Jane's perpetually youthful face softened slightly. I worried about protecting you in an environment I couldn't fully control. And now? Now we're deliberately walking into a gathering of dormant Death Eaters, Ministry officials who fear us, and thousands of wizard spectators who will either worship or demonize you. A rare smile touched her lips. Much more straightforward. Harry laughed. When you put it that way. They fell silent, watching the distant lights of Volterra town below. After nearly 9 years together, words were often unnecessary between them. Jane had become the sister he never had, while Alec was the brother who balanced her intensity with his quieter strength. The traditional, coven, concept barely described the complex family dynamics that had developed around Harry within the Volturi. "Arrow thinks it's starting again," Harry finally said. "The signs of Voldemort's return. The Horcruxes. My dreams getting more vivid." Jane nodded. "The pieces are moving. Which is why tomorrow matters, we're establishing your position on the board." "Not as a pawn this time," Harry said quietly. "Never again as a pawn," Jane agreed, her red eyes fierce in the moonlight. The Quidditch World Cup campground sprawled across acres of countryside, tens of thousands of wizards from around the world gathering in barely concealed magical tents. The arrival of Harry Potter with his vampire entourage created an immediate sensation, conversations halting, heads turning, whispers spreading like wildfire as they made their way toward the VIP section. Lucius Malfoy awaited them at the entrance to an elaborate pavilion, his long blonde hair and aristocratic features composed into a mask of welcoming civility. Beside him stood Draco, looking both proud and nervous about hosting his unusual schoolmate. "Mr. Potter," Lucius extended his hand. "How gracious of you to accept our invitation. And these must be your guardians." Harry shook the offered hand firmly. "Mr. Malfoy. Thank you for accommodating my family. You know my godfather, Sirius Black, of course." The tension crackled as Sirius and Lucius exchanged the coldest of greetings. Both men had carefully neutral expressions that didn't quite hide their mutual disdain. "And these are Jane and Alec Volturi," Harry continued smoothly, "my siblings in all but blood. Felix and Dimitri serve as our security." To Lucius's credit, he maintained his composure as he welcomed the vampires, though his complexion paled considerably when shaking hands with Felix, whose massive frame dwarfed the wizard. "Father's never been this polite to anyone," Draco whispered as they moved into the pavilion. "He spent an hour coaching Mother on proper etiquette for immortal guests." Harry grinned. The Volturi tend to have that effect. The Malfoy pavilion was opulent, magical chandeliers, self-serving refreshments, and private viewing boxes for the upcoming match. Other elite wizarding families milled about, their curious glances barely disguised as casual socializing. Harry navigated the gathering with practiced ease, drawing on years of Volturi diplomatic training. He accepted introductions, engaged in light conversation, and carefully noted which families seemed merely curious versus those showing more calculating interest. "The Knots are watching you too closely," Jane murmured during a momentary pause. "The father's heartbeat accelerates whenever you move near his son." Harry nodded imperceptibly. Theodore Knott was a quiet Slytherin in his year, his father a suspected Inner Circle Death Eater who had avoided Azkaban. Make a note for later investigation. Minister Fudge arrived with his entourage, his face falling comically when he spotted Harry surrounded by both vampires and the recently exonerated Sirius Black. Political necessity forced him to approach anyway. "Harry Potter," he boomed with forced joviality. "Wonderful to see you enjoying our premier sporting event. And with such diverse company." "Minister," Harry acknowledged politely. "An impressive international gathering. Though I understand security planning has been challenging." Fudge's smile faltered. "Everything's well in hand, my boy, well in hand. Nothing for you to worry about." "I never worry, Minister," Harry replied with a smile that mirrored arrows at his most enigmatic. "I prepare." The encounter set the tone for subsequent interactions with ministry officials, many of whom seemed torn between currying favor with the boy who lived and maintaining distance from his vampire associations. Harry used these tensions deliberately, observing which officials showed genuine concern versus political opportunism. By the time they took their seats for the match, Ireland versus Bulgaria, Harry had compiled mental notes on dozens of influential wizards, their apparent allegiances, and potential usefulness in the coming conflicts. The match itself was spectacular, with Bulgarian seeker Viktor Krum's legendary flying on full display. Harry found himself genuinely enjoying the sport despite his usually strategic mindset. Beside him, even Jane and Alec seemed captivated by the speed and precision of play. "So this is what excites wizards," Alec commented as Ireland scored another goal. "Interesting. Less blood than Roman games, but the skill is impressive." Sirius laughed. "Just wait till you see a proper Quidditch riot. Then you'll get your blood." His words proved unfortunately prophetic. Hours after Ireland's victory, as celebrations continued throughout the campground, the night erupted in chaos. Screams and explosions shattered the festive atmosphere as masked figures in black robes appeared, levitating Muggle campground managers above the crowd. "Death Eaters," Sirius growled, drawing his wand as they watched from the Malfoy pavilion entrance. "Drunk on victory and showing off." Harry noted that Lucius Malfoy was conspicuously absent, having excused himself shortly before the disturbance began. Draco remained, looking nervous but unsurprised by the chaos. "We should assist," Felix suggested, his predatory instincts responding to the disorder. "Not yet," Harry decided, watching the patterns of movement below. "This is theater, not warfare. They're performing their Death Eater identities, not launching a genuine attack." Jane nodded agreement. "Posturing. Testing boundaries after years of dormancy." The situation changed dramatically when a different symbol illuminated the night sky, a giant glittering skull with a snake protruding from its mouth. "The dark mark," Sirius breathed, his face paling. "That's not drunk former Death Eaters showing off. That's a statement." The revelry below transformed instantly to terror as wizards operated away in panic. Ministry officials appeared, firing spells toward the dark mark's origin point. "Now we move," Harry said firmly. "Jane, Alec, secure our exit route. Felix, Dimitri, perimeter assessment. Sirius, with me." They moved with practiced coordination, the vampires vanishing to execute their assignments while Harry and Sirius headed toward the dark mark's source. Years of training had prepared Harry for exactly this type of situation: controlled chaos, multiple factions, information-gathering opportunities. Before they could reach the forest where the mark had originated, they encountered Arthur Weasley and his children hurrying in the opposite direction. "Harry!" Ron called, looking relieved to see a familiar face. "Death Eaters attacking the campsite. Dad's told us to get back to the Portkey Point. Has anyone seen who cast the mark?" Harry asked urgently. "Ministry's already investigating that area," Arthur Weasley replied, glancing nervously at Sirius. "You boys should get to safety immediately." "We are safety," Sirius replied grimly, his wand ready. "Harry's better protected than anyone here." As if to emphasize his point, Jane and Alec materialized beside them, moving with supernatural speed that made several Weasleys gasp. "Clear path to extraction point established," Jane reported crisply. "Felix and Dimitri report Ministry forces converging on the mark's origin, but the caster is already gone." Harry nodded. "Mr. Weasley, you should get your family out as planned. We have our own exit strategy." The encounter was brief but significant, Harry's first public demonstration of his operational approach during a crisis. Rather than panicking or following Ministry directions, he had his own intelligence network, security team, and extraction plan. The Weasleys' expressions as they departed ranged from Ron's amazement to the twins' appreciation to Percy's disapproval of such independence. By morning, the incident dominated wizarding news. The Daily Prophet's headline screamed, "Scenes of Terror at Quidditch World Cup," with a subheading noting, "Boy Who Lived Observed with Vampire Security Detail." The article described Harry as, moving with military precision through the chaos, accompanied by notorious Volturi guards and recently exonerated Godfather Sirius Black, apparently implementing private security protocols independent of Ministry emergency measures. "They're painting you as either impressively prepared or dangerously autonomous," Sirius observed over breakfast at Grimmauld Place, where they'd relocated after leaving the campground. "Depending on which paragraph you read." Harry scanned the article, noting the political undertones. "They're testing public reaction. Seeing whether people feel reassured or threatened by a Harry Potter who doesn't depend on ministry protection. The real story is the mark itself, Jane pointed out. First public appearance in 13 years, coinciding with signs of movement among former Death Eaters. Someone sending a message. Or testing a response, Alec added quietly. Measuring reaction times, security gaps, and public panic thresholds. Harry nodded grimly. Reconnaissance before real action. Their assessment proved prescient as summer transitioned to fall. Reports reached Volterra of subtle movements among dark wizard circles, former Death Eaters making unexpected connections, magical artifacts changing hands through black markets, monitoring spells around known Voldemort supporters detecting increased activity. When Harry returned to Hogwarts for his 4th year, he arrived with enhanced security and heightened awareness. The Triwizard Tournament's revival created a perfect storm of international attention, reduced safety protocols to accommodate foreign visitors, and competitive pressures that could easily mask darker agendas. Remember, Arrow counseled through the communication mirror the night before term began, observe everything. The tournament is either a convenient distraction for Voldemort supporters or an opportunity they intend to exploit. Possibly both. Harry's return to Hogwarts brought immediate changes to his standing among students. His public appearance at the World Cup with Vampire Guardians and his composed response during the Death Eater attack had transformed perceptions. No longer just an unusual Ravenclaw with mysterious guardians, he was now viewed as a genuinely independent power, neither fully aligned with Dumbledore nor Ministry nor Dark families. This shift became apparent during the welcoming feast as Dumbledore announced the Triwizard Tournament. While students buzzed with excitement about eternal glory and the 1,000-galleon prize, Harry noted the headmaster watching him specifically, as though measuring his reaction. The age restriction is new, Harry commented to his fellow Ravenclaws. Historically, the tournament had no such limitations. You've researched it already? Terry Boot asked, unsurprised. The Volturi library contains accounts of previous tournaments, Harry explained. Including detailed descriptions of tasks and fatalities. Fatalities? A second-year squeaked. The tournament was discontinued for a reason, Harry shrugged. The 1792 event released a cockatrice that injured all 3 champions and several judges. This historical context spread quickly through Ravenclaw and beyond, tempering some of the initial excitement with healthy caution. Harry hadn't intended to dampen enthusiasm, merely to ensure his fellow students understood the reality behind the glamour, a habit developed through years of Volturi emphasis on informed decision-making. The arrival of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang delegations in October heightened the castle's festive atmosphere. Harry observed the new arrivals with particular interest, recognizing the political significance of renewed international magical cooperation after years of British isolation. Victor Crumb. Ron exclaimed during their weekly chess match in the library. Can you believe it? International Quidditch star right here at Hogwarts. Harry smiled at his friend's enthusiasm. Despite their different houses and increasingly divergent life experiences, he'd maintained his friendship with Ron through their shared interest in chess and Quidditch. I met him briefly at the World Cup, Harry said. Seemed focused. Intense. Of course you did, Ron shook his head in amazement. Sometimes I forget your life isn't normal, mate. Was it ever? Harry moved his knight, capturing Ron's bishop. Their conversation turned to the tournament itself, with Ron admitting he wished he could enter despite the age restriction. Eternal glory, Harry. And 1,000 galleons. And historical mortality rates approaching 30%, Harry added dryly. Don't worry about missing out. When Halloween arrived and the Goblet of Fire prepared to select champions, Harry sat with his housemates feeling a strange sense of foreboding. The Volturi Intelligence Network had reported increased dark wizard activity coinciding with tournament preparations, and Harry's own scar had begun occasionally prickling, a sensation he hadn't experienced since the soul fragments removal years ago. Dumbledore announced the champions with ceremonial flourish. Victor Crumb for Durmstrang drew appreciative applause. Fleur Delacour for Beauxbatons elicited admiration and some jealousy. Cedric Diggory's selection for Hogwarts united the school in enthusiastic support. Then the unexpected happened, the goblet's flames turned red once more, ejecting a fourth piece of parchment that Dumbledore caught with visible confusion. Harry Potter, he read, his voice lacking its usual confidence. A cold certainty settled in Harry's stomach as the hall fell silent. He'd anticipated many potential threats this year, but not this specific manipulation. His mind raced through implications and responses as hundreds of eyes turned toward him. "I did not enter my name," he stated clearly, remaining seated as whispers erupted around him. "Nor did I ask anyone to enter it for me." Professor Flitwick, who had worked closely with Harry for 3 years, immediately moved to his side. "Mr. Potter, please join the other champions. We'll sort this out." Harry rose with deliberate calm, maintaining the composed demeanor the Volturi had instilled in him. As he walked between tables, he noted the range of reactions: surprise, suspicion, concern, calculation, and filed them away for later analysis. In the side chamber, the other champions greeted his arrival with confusion. "What is it?" Fleur asked. "Do they want us back in the hall?" Before Harry could respond, the door burst open again as tournament officials and Hogwarts staff poured in, Dumbledore leading the way. "Harry," the headmaster asked with unusual intensity, "did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?" "No," Harry replied firmly. "And I can provide memory verification or take Veritasrum to confirm that statement." His immediate offer of magical proof caught several adults off guard, diffusing the initial accusatory atmosphere. Ludo Bagman, the former Quidditch star supervising the tournament, looked almost disappointed at Harry's denial. "Well, this is most unusual," he said. "But the rules are clear, those chosen by the goblet must compete. A binding magical contract is formed." "Binding how, specifically?" Harry asked, his Volturi legal training engaging. "What constitutes minimum compliance? What penalties apply for non-participation? Are there precedents for forced or fraudulent entries?" The officials exchanged uncomfortable glances. Barty Crouch Sr., the ministry representative, cleared his throat. "The contract requires participation in all 3 tasks. Failure results in magical penalty, potentially severe, though exact consequences vary by individual." "This is outrageous," Madame Maxime, the Beauxbatons headmistress, interrupted. "Hogwarts cannot have 2 champions." "I agree completely," Harry said, surprising everyone by aligning with the complaint. "This is clearly external manipulation designed to force my participation for unknown purposes. I suggest full investigation into how an underage student's name was entered and selected despite multiple safeguards." Dumbledore studied Harry with new appreciation. Gone was the manageable first year who politely answered questions. In his place stood a young man demonstrating political awareness, legal understanding, and crisis management skills well beyond his years. "A reasonable request," Dumbledore acknowledged. "Though I fear Mr. Bagman is correct about the binding nature of the selection. Investigation will proceed alongside preparation for the tournament." Harry nodded once. "Then I'll participate under protest, with formal notification to my guardians." "Your vampire guardians?" Igor Karkaroff, Durmstrang's headmaster, asked with poorly disguised distaste. "The very same," Harry confirmed pleasantly. "I'm sure they'll take great interest in tournament security after this breach." The implied threat wasn't lost on the officials. By morning, Harry had contacted Volterra through his communication mirror, initiating a multi-pronged response. Volturi legal experts began examining magical contract loopholes while their intelligence network investigated possible perpetrators. Arrow authorized Jane's return to Hogwarts as an observer for the first task, while Sirius worked through wizarding channels to demand ministry accountability. The student body's reaction split predictably. Ravenclaws generally believed Harry's denial, applying logical analysis to the situation. Hufflepuffs initially resented the perceived stealing of Cedric's spotlight, though Cedric himself publicly accepted Harry's position. Gryffindors were divided between excitement at having another potential Hogwarts victor and suspicion about Harry's methods. Slytherins, led by Draco Malfoy, created Potter Stinks badges that alternated with Support Cedric Diggory. Harry faced the situation with characteristic strategic thinking. Rather than defending himself against each accusation or seeking general popularity, he focused on key relationships and information gathering. His first significant move surprised everyone. He sought out Cedric Diggory directly, requesting a public meeting by the lake where anyone could observe but not overhear. "I want to be clear," Harry told the Hufflepuff champion as curious students watched from a distance. "I consider you Hogwarts' legitimate champion. I'll participate because the contract apparently requires it, but I have no interest in competing against you specifically." Cedric studied him thoughtfully. "You really didn't enter, did you?" "No. And I suspect whoever entered me has motives beyond seeing me compete in dangerous tasks." "You think it's connected to you-know-who somehow," Cedric said, surprising Harry with his perception. "The dark mark at the World Cup, now this." Harry nodded. "I'd recommend caution. Whoever's manipulating the tournament doesn't care about fair competition." This conversation established an unexpected alliance between the two Hogwarts champions. Cedric publicly supported Harry's position, helping quell the worst of the Hufflepuff resentment, while Harry shared his historical research on previous tournament challenges. The first task approached with mounting tension. Information about facing dragons leaked through Hagrid, giving Harry time to prepare strategy. Rather than focusing solely on his own approach, however, he ensured all champions received the same information, a move that confused those expecting cutthroat competition. "It's about more than winning," he explained to Hermione in the library. "If someone's manipulating the tournament for darker purposes, ensuring all champions are prepared improves overall safety." "That's very Ravenclaw of you," she observed. "Logical even in crisis." "It's very Volturi, actually," Harry corrected with a small smile. "They take a long view of conflicts. Individual victories matter less than strategic positioning." When the day of the first task arrived, Jane's presence in the stands created nearly as much stir as the dragons themselves. Her petite figure and childlike face belied the ancient vampire power that had professors watching nervously and students giving her wide berth despite her position in the visitors section. Harry's approach to the Hungarian horntail demonstrated everything his unusual upbringing had instilled. Rather than showcasing flashy spellwork or Gryffindor-style bravery, he employed efficiency and strategic thinking. A combination of disillusionment charms, precisely timed distraction spells, and a summoning charm for the golden egg allowed him to complete the task with minimal drama and maximum effectiveness. Somewhat anticlimactic, Bagman announced to the crowd, sounding disappointed by the lack of spectacular danger. "But certainly efficient. Potter completes the task without a scratch." Jane met Harry as he exited the champion's tent, her expression betraying nothing to observers though Harry recognized her approval. "Clean execution," she murmured. "Though I detected magical signatures around the arena boundaries that weren't part of the standard protections." "Someone monitoring specifically?" Harry asked quietly as they moved away from the crowds. "Or preparing contingencies if their primary plan failed," Jane confirmed. "Dimitri is already tracking the magical signature." The investigation into Harry's forced entry continued parallel to tournament preparations. Barty Crouch Sr., who had appeared increasingly unwell during the first task, became the focus of Volturi attention when Dimitri's tracking identified unusual magical patterns around the ministry officials' movements. "He's either under Imperius or being impersonated," Dimitri reported through the communication mirror. "The magical signature fluctuates in ways inconsistent with natural patterns." This intelligence shaped Harry's approach to the Yule Ball, the traditional formal dance accompanying the tournament. While other champions worried about dates and dancing, Harry viewed the event as an intelligence-gathering opportunity with every significant tournament figure present in one location. He invited Luna Lovegood, a quirky third-year Ravenclaw who saw the world through unusually perceptive eyes. "People underestimate her because of her unconventional perspectives," Harry explained to Jane. But she notices things others miss. A useful quality, Jane acknowledged. I've observed similar traits in humans who later became valuable informants. The Yule Ball itself proved both socially and strategically productive. Harry and Luna drew attention with their entrance, his formal black robes with subtle Volturi styling cues complementing her silver dress that somehow incorporated both elegance and whimsy. Everyone's watching you, Luna observed dreamily as they danced. Some because you're Harry Potter, some because they're afraid of what you represent, and some because they're trying to understand which pieces on the board you actually control. Harry smiled. And what do you see when you look at me, Luna? Someone between worlds, she replied without hesitation. Not fully wizard, not vampire, not quite human anymore. Something new. She tilted her head curiously. Is it lonely, being something new? The question caught Harry off guard with its perception. Sometimes, he admitted. But I have family in both worlds. And friends, she asked. Those too. He spun her gently as the music shifted. Including surprisingly insightful Ravenclaw seers. Oh, I'm not a seer, Luna laughed. I just pay attention. Throughout the evening, Harry navigated between social obligations and strategic objectives. He danced with Hermione, attending with Victor Krum to everyone's surprise, chatted with Cedric and his date Cho Chang, and even exchanged brief, tense pleasantries with Draco Malfoy, whose father had sent formal greetings. Most importantly, he observed the staff table where Barty Crouch Sr. was notably absent despite his tournament responsibilities. Igor Karkaroff appeared increasingly agitated throughout the evening, repeatedly attempting private conversations with Snape in corners. And Mad-Eye Moody, the defense against the dark arts professor, watched Harry with an intensity that seemed excessive even for the famously paranoid Exor. Moody's magical signature is wrong, Jane whispered during a quiet moment. It's layered, complex, consistent with sustained polyjuice usage. This revelation accelerated their investigation. If an impostor had replaced the legendary Auror, who had been specifically brought to Hogwarts by Dumbledore for additional security, the entire tournament security infrastructure was compromised. Harry relayed this information to Volterra, where Arrow coordinated a sophisticated response. Rather than exposing their knowledge immediately, they would monitor the impostor while preparing countermeasures for the most likely scenarios. If Voldemort's agent has gone to such lengths, Arrow reasoned through the mirror, their plan likely culminates with the final task. We prepare accordingly. The second task in February required rescuing hostages from the lake, a challenge Harry approached with characteristic efficiency, using gillyweed and precise underwater navigation to retrieve Ron Weasley, who had been selected as his thing he would sorely miss. The real work, however, continued behind the scenes. Harry maintained his tournament participation at exactly the level required to satisfy the magical contract while focusing his energy on identifying the broader threat. Working through the Volturi network, he pieced together alarming connections, Barty Crouch Sr.'s increasingly erratic behavior, his house elf's dismissal after the World Cup incident where the Dark Mark appeared, and ministry records showing his son, believed dead in Azkaban, had unusual burial circumstances. We believe Barty Crouch Jr. is alive and impersonating Alastor Moody, Dimitri reported after extensive tracking. The magical signatures match patterns consistent with a presumed dead Death Eater who was fanatically loyal to Voldemort. This intelligence painted a disturbing picture of the tournament's true purpose. The Goblet of Fire, the tasks, the increasingly suspicious behavior of key officials, all pointed toward the final task as the culmination of a complex plan centered on Harry. Rather than alerting Dumbledore or the Ministry, both of whom might have agendas conflicting with Harry's best interests, the Volturi implemented their own counter-strategy. Felix and Dimitri established a presence in Hogsmeade, disguised as foreign businessmen interested in the tournament. Sirius increased his visits to the castle, ostensibly checking on his godson's progress but actually implementing additional security measures. And Jane remained a constant, watchful presence, her very public role as vampire observer concealing her more specific protective assignment. As the third task approached in June, Harry received an unexpected visitor. Arrow himself, accompanied by Marcus and Caius, arrived at Hogwarts under the guise of guardian interest in the tournament's conclusion. Their arrival created an immediate sensation. The three Volturi kings had not left Volterra together in centuries, yet here they stood in Dumbledore's office, ancient vampire royalty facing the wizard considered Britain's greatest living sorcerer. An unexpected honor, Dumbledore said carefully, offering seats that the vampires declined with graceful headshakes. "We have growing concerns about Harry's safety," Arrow stated plainly. The tournament's irregular circumstances, combined with recent dark wizard activities, suggest orchestrated threats beyond normal competitive dangers. Dumbledore's blue eyes revealed nothing. "I assure you, every precaution has failed to identify how Harry's name entered the goblet," Caius interrupted coldly. "Has failed to recognize an impostor teaching defense against the dark arts. Has failed to explain Barty Crouch's deteriorating condition and mysterious absences." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Dumbledore's expression shifted from diplomatic to alert. "You have specific intelligence." "We have concerns," Marcus replied, his ancient voice soft yet carrying power accumulated over millennia. "Sufficient to warrant our personal attendance at the final task." What followed was a complex negotiation, Dumbledore unwilling to cede security authority at his school, the Volturi unwilling to leave Harry's protection to wizards who had repeatedly failed to detect manipulation. The compromise reached allowed the Volturi leaders to observe the final task alongside other dignitaries, with certain security consultants positioned around the maze perimeter. Harry, summoned to this meeting midway through, recognized the political maneuvering behind the formal language. Dumbledore was learning firsthand what the Ministry already knew: vampire guardianship meant Harry had protection and resources beyond wizard control. "We believe the maze is merely prelude," Arrow told Harry privately after the meeting. "The true threat likely involves removing you from Hogwarts grounds entirely, beyond Dumbledore's wards and our immediate reach." "Portkey," Harry suggested. "It's the only magical transportation that could bypass Hogwarts protections if pre-authorized for the tournament." "Precisely our conclusion," Caius confirmed. "The trophy itself is the most logical vessel." This intelligence shaped Harry's approach to the final task. While he prepared the standard spells and strategies expected for the maze challenge, his true preparation focused on what might happen after reaching the trophy. The Volturi provided specialized protective amulets designed to resist portkey manipulation, tracking charms undetectable by wizard methods, and emergency portkeys disguised as ordinary tournament equipment. Most significantly, Harry received a specialized blood-based tracker, a tiny vial of his own blood mixed with vampire venom that would allow Dimitri to track him beyond normal magical concealment. The tracker was uncomfortable with such methods, but acknowledged their necessity given the stakes. "Blood magic isn't pretty," Sirius had commented during preparations, "but it works when conventional magic fails. The Death Eaters won't expect it because they think it's beneath light wizards." "The Volturi have no such limitations," Harry replied. "That's their advantage." The night of the final task arrived with palpable tension. The maze stood ominous on the Quidditch pitch, surrounded by stands filled with excited spectators unaware of the undercurrents flowing beneath the spectacle. Minister Fudge presided with pompous ceremony, while Dumbledore watched everything with unusual intensity. In the champions' tent, Harry spoke briefly with Cedric, Fleur, and Victor. "Whatever happens in there," he told them quietly, "remember that winning isn't worth your life. If something feels wrong, send up red sparks immediately." Fleur looked at him curiously. "You speak as if you expect more on a maze, Harry." "Just being cautious," he replied. "Good luck to all of you." The cannon sounded, and the champions entered the maze at intervals based on their standing. Harry, tied with Cedric for first place, moved into the shadowy passages with his wand ready and senses alert for threats beyond the planned obstacles. The maze itself proved challenging but manageable. Harry dispatched a boggart, navigated shifting walls, and avoided the worst of a blast-ended scrut using techniques Felix had taught him for evading larger predators. Throughout, he maintained awareness of his position relative to the maze center, where he knew the trophy, and likely trap, awaited. He encountered Cedric battling an acromantula and helped dispatch the giant spider. In the confusion that followed, they realized they stood mere yards from the Triwizard Cup, glowing with eerie blue light in the maze's heart. "Take it," Cedric panted, gesturing toward the trophy. "You saved me from the spider. You deserve it." Harry shook his head. "It's not what it seems, Cedric." "What do you mean?" "I believe the cup is a trap, a portkey to something beyond the tournament." Cedric's eyes widened. "You're serious? That's why the Volturi Kings are here. You're expecting something to happen." Harry nodded grimly. "I need to trigger the trap to expose whoever's behind this. But you should send up Sparks, get out of here. And leave you to face it alone." Cedric straightened. "Not bloody likely. My father didn't raise a coward." "This isn't about courage," Harry insisted. "It's about having backup," Cedric interrupted. "Two wands are better than one, Harry." The Hufflepuff's loyalty was admirable if strategically complicated. Harry quickly recalculated his approach, knowing the Volturi tracking would work regardless but concerned about Cedric's safety. "Take this," Harry said, pressing a small object into Cedric's hand. "Emergency port key disguised as a good luck charm. Activation phrase is Sanctuary, if things go wrong." Cedric nodded, tucking it into his robes. "Together, then." With reluctance, Harry agreed. On 3. 1, 2, 3, they grabbed the trophy simultaneously. Immediately, the familiar hook-behind-navel sensation of portkey travel seized them, pulling them beyond Hogwarts' boundaries into the unknown. They landed hard in a dark graveyard, surrounded by ancient tombstones and a looming angel statue. Harry recognized it immediately from his preparatory research, Little Hangleton Cemetery, connected to Voldemort's maternal ancestry. "The cup was a portkey," Cedric said unnecessarily, looking around in confusion. "Is this part of the task?" "No," Harry said grimly, already moving into a defensive position and activating the blood tracker with a quick press against his wrist. "Cedric, use the emergency portkey now." Before Cedric could respond, a high, cold voice cut through the night air, "Kill the spare. Avada Kedavra." A flash of green light erupted from between nearby graves. Harry's Volturi training kicked in, he tackled Cedric sideways while wandlessly conjuring a stone barrier. The killing curse missed by inches, striking a tombstone that exploded into fragments. "Sanctuary!" Harry shouted, slapping the emergency portkey in Cedric's hand. The Hufflepuff disappeared with a look of horrified realization, leaving Harry alone in the graveyard, exactly as planned. With Cedric safely removed, Harry implemented the strategy developed with the Volturi. Rather than attempting immediate escape, which might fail against whatever anti-transportation wards were likely in place, he would gather intelligence while his blood tracker summoned reinforcements. He rolled behind a large tombstone as more curses flew, identifying his attacker, Peter Pettigrew, somehow freed from Ministry custody, carrying a bundle in his arms. "Restrain him," commanded the high voice from the bundle. "I need him alive and relatively undamaged." Harry fired precise hexes while moving between gravestones, implementing the combat techniques Felix had drilled into him for years. His objective wasn't to win an extended duel but to maintain position and gather information until support arrived. Pettigrew proved more formidable than expected, likely empowered by whatever dark magic emanated from the bundle he'd set down. A powerful blasting curse shattered Harry's cover, sending him tumbling across uneven ground. Before he could recover, magical ropes snaked around his limbs, binding him tightly to a large marble headstone. "Excellent, Wormtail," came the cold voice. "Now proceed." What followed was a ritual straight from the darkest grimoires in the Volturi library, a massive cauldron, bone from Voldemort's father's grave, flesh willingly given as Pettigrew cut off his own hand, and finally, blood forcibly taken from Harry's arm. "Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe," Pettigrew intoned, adding Harry's blood to the bubbling mixture. Harry remained outwardly calm while testing his bonds and assessing the ritual's progression. The Volturi had theorized something like this might be Voldemort's eventual goal, though the specific ritual components weren't fully predictable. The blood extraction was concerning but not unexpected. Harry's protective amulets were designed to mitigate magical bindings and blood curses rather than prevent physical collection. The cauldron erupted in blinding light, then smoke. From within the vapors rose a tall, skeletal figure, pale white skin stretched over an inhuman face with glowing red eyes and slits for nostrils. Lord Voldemort had returned to physical form. "Robe me," he commanded Pettigrew, who scrambled to comply despite his bleeding stump. Voldemort examined his new body with evident satisfaction, flexing long fingers and testing his movement before finally turning his attention to Harry. "Harry Potter," he said softly. "The boy who lived. How fitting that you should witness my rebirth, as I witnessed your parents' deaths." Harry met the red gaze steadily. "Hello, Tom. New body. It lacks something of the original, I must say." Anger flashed across Voldemort's serpentine features before smoothing into cold amusement. "Brave words from a bound child. But then, I've heard interesting rumors about your upbringing. Vampires, Harry. How disappointingly predictable for an orphan to seek out dark creatures for the family he lost." "The Volturi would take issue with that characterization," Harry replied calmly. "They prefer apex predators with refined cultural sensibilities." Voldemort circled Harry slowly. "Your composure is remarkable. No begging, no tears. Perhaps there's something to this vampire education after all." He stopped directly before Harry. "But where are your protectors now? Your vampire family? Your reformed godfather? Your great defender Dumbledore?" Harry smiled slightly. "Closer than you think." Voldemort dismissed this with a wave. "Bluffing won't save you. This location is unplottable, protected by ancient wards, and unknown to anyone but my most loyal servant who delivered you to me." Barty Crouch Jr., impersonating Mad-Eye Moody, Harry confirmed. "We've known for months." This revelation visibly startled Voldemort, but he recovered quickly. "Yet you came anyway. Curious strategy." "I needed confirmation of your methods," Harry explained, subtly testing the ropes again and noting they'd loosened slightly. "Horcruxes for immortality, ritual resurrection using enemy blood, important details for planning your permanent destruction." For the first time, genuine surprise showed on Voldemort's inhuman face. "You know about, the diary was quite informative before I destroyed it," Harry interrupted. "As was the fragment you accidentally left in my scar as an infant. Both removed, I'm afraid." Rage contorted Voldemort's features. He raised his wand, only to pause as Pettigrew frantically pointed to the sky. "Master, look." A black cloud was forming above the graveyard, too dense and directional to be natural weather. It descended rapidly, resolving into dozens of swirling forms that materialized into black-robed figures, Death Eaters answering their master's call through the dark mark. "Ah, my faithful," Voldemort turned from Harry to address his followers as they formed a circle around them. 13 years it has been, and here you stand before me as though it were yesterday." His voice turned cold. 13 years, and not one of you tried to find me." What followed was Voldemort's address to his followers, part reunion, part punishment as he identified each masked figure by name, distributing measured doses of the Cruciatus Curse to remind them of his dominance. Harry used this distraction to continue working at his bonds while counting Death Eaters and identifying voices, valuable intelligence if he survived to report it. "And now," Voldemort finally said, turning back to Harry, "I shall demonstrate that Harry Potter's legendary survival was mere chance, easily corrected. I shall kill him before you all, proving once and for all that I am the greater wizard." He flicked his wand, releasing Harry's bonds. "We will duel properly, with courtesy. Bow to death, Harry." Instead of responding directly, Harry took a deliberate breath and focused. The Volturi had prepared him for this moment with years of training against superior opponents. Victory wasn't the objective, survival and intelligence gathering were. I said bow, Voldemort snarled, flicking his wand to force Harry's spine to bend. Good. Now we duel. Crucio. Harry sidestepped, implementing the evasion techniques Felix had drilled into him. The curse missed by inches as Harry responded with a rapid series of spells, not the standard schoolboy hexes Voldemort might expect, but precisely chosen combat magic from the Volturi archives. The first spell temporarily blinded with intense light. The second conjured smoke to provide cover. The third was a blood-freezing hex aimed at Voldemort's wand hand, dark magic that shocked the watching Death Eaters. Voldemort blocked the combination with a snarl of surprise. Interesting selection, Potter. Not Dumbledore's approved curriculum, I think. Their duel escalated rapidly, Voldemort's raw power and decades of experience against Harry's unconventional training and strategic approach. Harry knew he couldn't win through direct confrontation, so he focused on mobility and distraction, using the graveyard environment as Felix had taught him. Impressive for a child, Voldemort acknowledged after a particularly complex exchange left a mausoleum in ruins. But ultimately futile. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse shot toward Harry just as he cast his own spell, not a matching attack but a summoning charm aimed at a nearby Death Eater. The unprepared follower was yanked forward into the curse's path, collapsing instantly as Harry rolled away. Outraged shouts erupted from the Death Eater circle. Voldemort's face contorted with fury at the tactical sacrifice of his follower. Enough games. Avada, a new sound interrupted, a high, keening whistle that made several Death Eaters clutch their ears. The night air suddenly grew colder, a familiar sensation to Harry but clearly alarming to the assembled dark wizards. What is this? Voldemort demanded, looking skyward. The darkness above the graveyard seemed to deepen, swirling into unnatural patterns before figures detached from the shadows, dozens of them, moving with inhuman grace as they descended. The Volturi guard had arrived, led by Felix and Dimitri, with Jane and Alec floating at the forefront like dark angels. Vampires, gasped one Death Eater. My lord, these are the Volturi. Voldemort's serpentine features registered recognition, even he knew of the vampire rulers. An interesting development, but ultimately meaningless. Vampires can be killed like any creature. Some creatures are harder to kill than others, came Arrow's voice as the ancient vampire materialized beside Harry. As you yourself have demonstrated, Tom Riddle. The Death Eaters faltered, several backing away instinctively. Vampires were feared even in dark wizard circles, their speed, strength, and immunity to many spells making them formidable opponents. This need not be conflict, Voldemort offered, his tactical mind immediately assessing the changed situation. The Volturi and my followers share certain, philosophical alignments regarding power and natural dominance. Arrow smiled coldly. How diplomatic. But you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. He placed a protective hand on Harry's shoulder. You've threatened one under our protection, one we consider family. Jane stepped forward, her childlike face serene as she focused on Voldemort. This is the one. Indeed, dear one, Arrow confirmed. The effect was immediate, Voldemort collapsed with an inhuman scream as Jane's gift of illusory pain struck him with full force. Several Death Eaters raised wands only to find themselves engaged by Volturi guards moving faster than human reflexes could track. Chaos erupted in the graveyard. Vampires tore through Death Eater ranks with terrifying efficiency while Alec's gift of sensory deprivation cut off entire sections of Voldemort's forces from awareness. Those wizards with enough presence of mind attempted apparition, only to discover anti-transportation wards still in effect, though these worked to the Volturi's advantage, trapping their prey. Harry fought alongside his vampire family, his years of training evident in how seamlessly he coordinated with their movements. Where Felix crushed wand arms with superhuman strength, Harry followed with binding spells. Where Jane incapacitated targets with her gift, Harry secured them with specialized restraints designed for dark wizard capture. Voldemort himself recovered from Jane's initial attack, his inhuman nature providing some resistance to her gift. With a furious snarl, he directed a killing curse at Arrow, who moved with impossible speed to avoid it. "You cannot win this, Tom," Arrow said conversationally, as though discussing chess rather than lethal combat. "Your followers are outnumbered, outmatched, and unprepared for our kind. Surrender the field and we may allow your retreat." "I do not surrender," Voldemort hissed, casting a complex spell that erupted into a fiery serpent large enough to threaten multiple vampires. The magical construct writhed toward the Volturi guards, its heat genuinely dangerous even to immortals. Harry recognized its classification immediately: Fiendfire, one of the few magical threats vampires truly feared. Without hesitation, Harry stepped forward, drawing on his years of magical control training. Rather than trying to extinguish the Fiendfire directly, nearly impossible once manifested, he implemented a containment strategy Ileana had taught him specifically for such scenarios. A series of precisely cast spells created magical barriers that redirected the fiery serpent back toward Voldemort, forcing the Dark Lord to divert his attention to preventing his own creation from consuming him. This momentary distraction allowed Dimitri and Felix to close distance. Voldemort recognized his tactical position deteriorating. With a snarl of rage, he cast a blasting curse at the ground, creating explosive force and debris that momentarily disrupted the vampire advance. In that brief window, he activated some form of emergency escape, not standard apparition but a specialized dark magic transportation that tore through the existing wards. "Track him," Arrow commanded Dimitri, who immediately focused on the magical signature. "Northern Albania," the tracker reported after a moment. "But moving rapidly. He has additional transportation prepared." With their leader gone, the remaining Death Eaters faced grim prospects. Some managed desperate escapes by portkey or breaking through weakened wards. Others fell to vampire strength or Harry's specialized restraining spells. The night filled with the sounds of combat, screams, and the distinct, sickening noise of vampire feeding as some guards took advantage of the battle's chaos to satisfy their thirst. When the fighting finally ceased, the graveyard resembled a war zone: broken tombstones, magical scorch marks, and bodies both dead and merely incapacitated. Harry stood with Arrow, surveying the aftermath as Volturi guards secured prisoners. "You arrived exactly on schedule," Harry noted, wiping blood from a cut on his cheek. "The blood tracker functioned perfectly," Arrow replied. "Though I confess, watching his resurrection ritual was not part of our original plan." "Necessary intelligence," Harry said pragmatically. "Now we know his new form's composition, capabilities, and limitations." Arrow studied him with ancient eyes. Most humans would be traumatized by such experiences. "You catalog them as data points." "I had good teachers," Harry replied with a small smile. The aftermath extended far beyond the graveyard. At Hogwarts, Cedric's return via emergency portkey had triggered immediate alarm. Dumbledore, already suspicious due to the Volturi King's unprecedented attendance, had mobilized the Order of the Phoenix, his secret organization from the First War, only to find their tracking attempts frustrated by the graveyard's protections. When Harry returned to Hogwarts grounds via Volturi transport several hours later, he found the castle in controlled chaos. Ministry officials, tournament organizers, frantic professors, and concerned students crowded the entrance hall, all demanding explanations about the interrupted tournament and Cedric's wild claims about Death Eaters and ambushes. The appearance of Harry flanked by Arrow, Jane, and several Volturi guards silenced the tumult instantly. More shocking was the group that followed, bound Death Eaters, captured during the graveyard confrontation, being marched onto Hogwarts grounds by vampire captors. "Mr. Potter," Minister Fudge sputtered, his face alternating between red and white. "What is the meaning of this? Who are these people? Why are they restrained?" "Death Eaters, Minister," Harry replied clearly, his voice carrying across the entrance hall. "Captured at Little Hangleton Graveyard after they witnessed and participated in Lord Voldemort's physical resurrection." Gasps and screams rippled through the gathered crowd. Fudge's face settled on an unhealthy purple. Preposterous. You know who cannot, remove their masks, Arrow commanded, and the Volturi guards complied, revealing faces that sent new shock waves through the observers, Crabbe Sr., Goyle Sr., Not, Avery, and most dramatically, Lucius Malfoy himself. Impossible, Fudge whispered, staring at Malfoy's aristocratic features contorted with impotent rage. Lucius is a respected ministry supporter, a generous donor to worthy causes, a marked Death Eater who attended his master's rebirthing ritual, Harry corrected firmly. As Veritaserum questioning will confirm. Dumbledore stepped forward, his usual twinkling gaze replaced by hard, tactical assessment. Harry is correct, Minister. These are indeed Death Eaters, and if they were gathered as he describes, then Voldemort has returned. I refuse to believe it. Fudge declared, looking desperately around at the growing crowd. This must be some vampire trick. Some plot to destabilize the ministry. How unfortunate, Arrow commented with deadly softness. Your minister appears to value political comfort over factual reality. A dangerous trait in leadership during wartime. What followed was the most public confrontation between magical factions in recent British history. With students, foreign delegates, and press witnesses present, the evidence of Voldemort's return was laid bare through captured Death Eaters, Cedric's testimony, and the unveiling of Barty Crouch Jr., discovered imprisoned in his own magical trunk, the real Moody having been kept alive for ongoing Polyjuice production. The Ministry's attempts to control the narrative collapsed entirely when Rita Skeeter, the notorious reporter who had been covering the tournament all year, emerged from the crowd in her Beetle Animagus form, a secret Harry had discovered and leveraged months earlier, to document everything. Minister denies visible evidence of you-know-who's return while Death Eaters stand captured, would be the next day's headline, accompanied by magical photographs of the bound Death Eaters, their dark marks visibly active. In the chaos that followed, Harry demonstrated the leadership qualities his unusual upbringing had instilled. Rather than allowing the situation to dissolve into panic or fragmented responses, he facilitated a structured approach, bringing together representatives from multiple factions. Dumbledore and key professors represented Hogwarts. Arrow, Marcus and Caius spoke for the Volturi. Amelia Bones, summoned urgently from the DMLE, provided ministry authority when Fudge proved incapable. Igor Karkaroff had fled upon seeing captured Death Eaters, confirming his own dark mark connection. Madame Maxime stayed to represent Bosbaden's interests. They convened in the Great Hall, converted to an emergency council chamber as details were established, testimonies recorded, and preliminary plans developed. Throughout, Harry moved between groups, his unique position as both wizard and Volturi ward making him the natural bridge between factions. You're not acting like a survivor of trauma, Dumbledore observed quietly when he found a moment alone with Harry. But like a general coordinating aftermath. I've been preparing for this possibility for years, Harry replied simply. The Volturi don't believe in sheltering children from reality, Headmaster. They believe in preparing them to face it. Dumbledore studied him with new recognition. I underestimated what your vampire guardianship would mean. I expected psychological damage, moral compromises, perhaps dark leanings. Instead, I find exceptional preparation, strategic thinking, and unexpected alliances. The Volturi taught me to see beyond simplistic categories like dark and light, Harry explained. They taught me to evaluate actions by their outcomes and intentions, not by their classifications in wizard terminology. A dangerous philosophy in the wrong hands, Dumbledore noted. Most powerful philosophies are, Harry agreed. Which is why character development was equally emphasized in my education. Their conversation was interrupted as Amelia Bones approached, her monocle flashing in the torchlight. Potter, we need your formal statement about the graveyard. And I have questions about vampire jurisdiction in British magical territory. As the night progressed toward dawn, the initial shock hardened into grim reality. Voldemort had returned, war was inevitable, and the wizarding world's response was already fragmenting along political lines despite irrefutable evidence. Fudge, recovering from his initial denial, pivoted to damage control, acknowledging disturbing events while questioning their interpretation and focusing on the vampire intervention in British affairs. Supporters of stricter creature regulations rallied around this narrative, using the Volturi's combative role to distract from Voldemort's return. Dumbledore mobilized his allies differently, reactivating old networks and establishing new ones, with Hogwarts as the central hub of resistance. His approach focused on unifying wizard opposition to Voldemort while cautiously managing the vampire involvement as a temporary alliance. The Volturi themselves made their position clear through Arrow's public statement: "We claim no territory in Wizard Britain, seek no political authority in your governance, and have no interest in your internal conflicts beyond protecting Harry Potter and eliminating threats to the established separation of magical domains." Voldemort has demonstrated willingness to breach these separations, therefore, he represents a mutual concern. Through it all, Harry found himself in an unprecedented position, not aligned exclusively with any single faction, but connected meaningfully to each. The wizarding public, initially divided on his vampire upbringing, now saw him as a bridge figure between powerful forces. The Daily Prophet dubbed him, the Vampire Prince, in headlines that mixed fear and fascination, describing him as educated by immortals, connected to ancient wizard families through Godfather Sirius Black, and demonstrated combat effectiveness against Death Eaters. As the immediate crisis response stabilized, Harry faced a critical decision about his next steps. Dumbledore invited him to spend the summer at a secure Order of the Phoenix location, offering specialized training and integration with the primary wizard resistance. The Ministry, through Amelia Bones rather than Fudge, extended an offer of aura protection and advanced defense instruction. And the Volturi expected his return to Volterra for intensive preparation based on new intelligence about Voldemort's capabilities. The evening before students departed Hogwarts, Harry stood on the astronomy tower with Jane and Sirius, watching the sun set over the Scottish Highlands. "You're considering Dumbledore's offer," Jane observed, her childlike face unreadable in the fading light. Harry nodded. "And Bones's. And Volterra's. Each has strategic value. Each wants to secure your allegiance," Sirius noted. "You've become a power center in your own right, kiddo. Not just Harry Potter the boy who lived, but Harry of the Volturi, with connections across multiple worlds. Which makes my next choice significant beyond personal preference," Harry acknowledged. "It sends a message about alignments in the coming conflict." Jane's red eyes reflected the sunset as she studied him. "Arrow anticipated this moment years ago, you know. He said eventually you would need to define your own position rather than occupying spaces others created for you." "What did he recommend?" Harry asked curiously. "He didn't," Jane replied. "He said true power comes from making choices others must respond to, not from selecting among options they present." Harry considered this wisdom, so characteristic of his vampire mentor. The traditional paths before him, Dumbledore's order, the Ministry's protection, even the Volturi's guidance, all represented existing power structures with their own agendas and limitations. "What if I choose differently?" he mused aloud. "Not rejecting alliances, but reconfiguring them. Not picking sides, but establishing a new position." Sirius raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of creating your own faction?" "Not exactly," Harry clarified, the idea crystallizing as he spoke. "More like a nexus point, a connection hub where different allies can coordinate without surrendering their autonomy or compromising their principles." Jane's lips curved in a slight smile. "Arrow will be pleased. He's always said human magical communities suffer from unnecessary fragmentation." "It won't be easy," Sirius warned. "Everyone wants you firmly in their camp, flying their flag exclusively." "Then they'll be disappointed," Harry said simply. "Because I'm not choosing between my worlds anymore. I'm bringing them together." As twilight deepened into night, Harry's decision solidified. He would return briefly to Volterra to consult with Arrow and develop specifics, then establish headquarters at the recently renovated Black family properties, magical locations with ancient protections that belonged neither to the Ministry nor to Dumbledore's order. From this independent position, he would build connections between factions based on shared objectives rather than complete ideological alignment. The Volturi's intelligence networks, Dumbledore's academic resources, the Ministry's legal authorities, and other magical communities' diverse perspectives would all contribute to a coordinated response to Voldemort's return. "You're 14, Sirius reminded him with a mixture of pride and concern. "Planning to reshape magical alliance structures during a war." Harry smiled slightly. "Technically 15 in a few weeks. And age is just one measure of readiness." "The vampires have corrupted you entirely," Sirius said with a theatrical sigh, then grinned. "Your parents would be both terrified and impressed." "As they should be," Jane added with unexpected warmth. "He's becoming something new, not quite wizard, not vampire, but perhaps exactly what both worlds need." As the stars appeared above Hogwarts, Harry Potter, child of prophecy, Volturi ward, wizard student, and increasingly his own defined entity, contemplated the path ahead. Voldemort had returned, believing he understood the playing field and the pieces upon it. He would soon discover that the board had changed, and that the supposed pawn he had dismissed in the graveyard was now moving with the combined strategic power of multiple magical traditions. The coming conflict would not be a simple rematch of the previous Wizard War. It would involve new alliances, unprecedented combinations of magic, and perspectives that cross traditional boundaries. And at its center would stand a young man raised between worlds, determined to protect both while being controlled by neither. As Harry later wrote in correspondence to Arrow, "I am neither fully of your world nor solely of theirs, but something forged at the intersection." Perhaps that is not a weakness to overcome, but precisely the strength required for the challenges ahead. "Blood ties connect me to both worlds, my parents' sacrifice, your vampire guidance, and now the blood Voldemort took to restore himself. These connections don't divide my loyalties, they multiply my resources." The ancient vampire lord's response was characteristically brief but approving. "You have learned the most important lesson we could teach. True power lies not in rejecting complexity but in embracing and directing it. The pieces are in motion. The game transforms. And you, dear Harry, are no longer merely a player, but becoming a board unto yourself." 2 years later, as the Wizarding War reached its climax, that transformation would prove decisive. The final confrontation brought together Ministry forces, Dumbledore's Order, international wizard allies, and a contingent of Volturi elites, all coordinated through the network Harry had built from his independent position. Voldemort, despite his considerable power and Death Eater army, found himself facing not just Harry Potter but an unprecedented magical coalition that transcended traditional boundaries. His Horcruxes systematically located and destroyed through combined intelligence operations. His political manipulations countered by sophisticated counternarratives developed with vampire strategic guidance. His combat advantages neutralized by defense teams combining wizard spellwork with vampire physical capabilities. The Dark Lord had prepared for a wizard war against familiar opponents. Instead, he encountered a hybrid response that leveraged strengths from multiple magical traditions while minimizing their individual weaknesses. In the smoking ruins of Malfoy Manor, where the final battle claimed lives from all factions, Harry stood over Voldemort's defeated form, not as the destined hero of wizard prophecy, but as the architect of a new approach to magical cooperation. "You never understood what you created that night in Godric's Hollow," Harry told his fallen enemy. "When you marked me and orphaned me, you set in motion something beyond your comprehension. Not just a magical connection between us, but a bridge between worlds that should never have met." Voldemort, wounded and wandless but defiant to the end, snarled, "You're still just a boy playing with powers beyond your understanding." "No, Tom," Harry replied quietly. "I'm something new, shaped by vampire wisdom, wizard heritage, and choices entirely my own. And that's what defeated you, not prophecy, not destiny, but the unexpected combination no one prepared for." As Ministry officials secured the scene and survivors tended wounds, Arrow materialized beside Harry, his ancient eyes surveying the battle's aftermath with satisfaction. "When we found you in that cupboard, I sensed potential for something extraordinary," the vampire lord mused. But even I couldn't have foreseen this precise outcome. Harry smiled slightly. A child raised by vampires, educated by wizards, and ultimately defined by neither. It does sound improbable. The most significant transformations often do, Arrow agreed. The question now is what comes next. With Voldemort defeated, how will you use the position you've established between our worlds? Harry looked around at the mixed groups working together in the aftermath, vampire guards assisting wizard healers, ministry officials coordinating with international representatives, former enemies finding common purpose in reconstruction. I think, he said thoughtfully, that bridges work in both directions. The separation between magical communities has created vulnerabilities and limited potential for too long. Perhaps it's time for carefully managed integration rather than traditional isolation. Arrow's papery face broke into a genuine smile. Ah, young Harry. Always expanding the game board rather than simply winning the current match. Truly my student. And Dumbledore's, Harry added. And Sirius's. And countless others from both worlds. That's rather the point. As sunrise approached, vampire allies retreated to protected spaces while wizard celebrations began. Harry moved between groups with practiced ease, embodying the connection he had established between traditionally separated magical communities. The boy who lived had become something unprecedented, not defined by survival of Voldemort's curse, but by the deliberate bridging of magical worlds that had remained separate for millennia. His story had transformed from tragic orphan to unexpected diplomat, from prophesied savior to architectural innovator. In the years that followed, historians would debate whether Harry Potter should be classified as a wizard influenced by vampires or as the first true hybrid magical diplomat. But those who knew him best understood that such classifications missed the essential point. He was neither and both and something else entirely, a new type of magical entity defined not by birth or species or tradition, but by the conscious choice to integrate rather than divide, to connect rather than isolate. As Jane once observed to her brother Alec while watching Harry address the first formal diplomatic summit between wizard governments and vampire covens, we expected to create a powerful wizard ally. Instead, we helped birth something unprecedented, a translator between worlds that never truly spoke before. Alec nodded thoughtfully. Arrow's greatest experiment, though I doubt even he fully anticipated the outcome. No, Jane agreed with one of her rare smiles. But that's what makes it magnificent. Even immortals can still be surprised by what emerges when boundaries blur. The vampire twins watched their human brother, for that was how they had come to see him, continue his work of connection, his lightning scar long faded but his impact on magical society only beginning to unfold. The boy who lived had become the man who bridged, and that transformation would ultimately prove more significant than any prophecy could have predicted. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.